In a sun-dappled forest, a purple, deer-like creature with branching horns lies on the ground, its legs bound by a rope trap. A voice declares its success, confirming the animal fell right into the snare. The hunter, a young man with black hair, hoists his prize onto his shoulders, pleased that he'll finally have proper meat. His satisfaction is short-lived, however, as a low growl emanates from behind him. A massive, tusked boar with glowing red eyes emerges from the trees, dwarfing him completely. A piercing scream echoes through the woods as the young man's face contorts in terror. Beside him, a girl with white hair, small horns, and wide yellow eyes appears just as suddenly, her expression one of pure shock. The source of his terror, the giant boar, charges forward with immense force, shaking the very ground as it closes the distance. He scrambles backward to escape the beast's path, crying out in dismay as the boar tramples directly over his captured deer, crushing his precious meal. His face hardens with grim realization. As expected of the devil's realm, nothing here would be easy. He wonders to himself just how he ended up in such a hellish place. His memory drifts back to a few days ago, to a large stone building with a turret. This is where it all began. He questions what exactly went wrong. Inside an office, an old man with a long white mustache smokes a pipe and delivers bad news. He informs the young man that he's a bit late. The land he wanted was sold 4 days ago. The news strikes the young man with disbelief. He reveals the 5 dirty coins in his hand, explaining that it took him 3 years of saving without wasting anything to gather them. Now, they're useless for the land he had his eye on for so long. He desperately asks the broker if there is any other good land available. The broker explains that, unfortunately, desirable land is hard to come by, especially with only 5 gold coins. Unwilling to give up, the young man declares that any land will do, even a plot without a house where he can simply sleep. He pleads for help. After a moment of consideration, the broker looks at him intently and agrees. He unrolls a large map across the table, indicating a specific plot. For the young man's price, he has something. A large piece of land worth exactly 5 coins. The young man listens intently as the broker describes the land. A forest surrounded by mountains, cliffs, and the sea. It is far from town, he warns, and completely unexplored, with no information available. Despite the risks, the young man sees no other option. With nothing left to lose, he declares he will take it. This desperate decision was the culmination of a long journey. He reflects that he never possessed any particular talents, a fact that led to him being cast out of his home as soon as he turned 15. Finding himself on his own, he impulsively became an adventurer, drawn by the simple appeal of the lifestyle. He recalls leaving his family's farm, a confused look on his face as his parents watch him depart. The romantic notion quickly shattered against a harsh reality. He found the life of a low-ranking adventurer to be grim, a world of wary glances from townsfolk and the intimidating presence of more seasoned warriors. He had once admired the high-ranking adventurers who occasionally passed through, but he soon learned the truth. Most so-called adventurers were far from free. They lacked any real combat skills and worked menial jobs just to barely survive. Just like them, he took on whatever odd jobs he could find, from pulling weeds to other manual labor. He watched as others in his position wasted what little money they saved on fleeting, temporary pleasures. He despaired, realizing this path was useless and would only lead to a worse state. Lacking any talent as a merchant or an artisan, he even considered giving up on being an adventurer entirely. But then, in his moment of hopelessness, he remembered his roots. He was the son of a farmer. Even if he failed as an adventurer, everything could change if he had his own land. With this newfound determination, he worked for 3 long years, managing to save up 5 coins. Now, standing equipped with an axe and supplies, he declares that he finally has his own land. A new life is about to begin. He travels toward the barren frontier until a soldier from the Kingdom of Estonia halts his progress. The guard questions where he is going, informing him that nothing lies ahead but a military training facility. The young man calmly explains that he has purchased the land just beyond, a statement that leaves the soldier speechless. The soldier, skeptical, points out that the area is practically unexplored territory known as the demonic realm. To verify his claim, the guard asks to see his adventurer card. He presents his adventurer card, a device that records one's name and rank. The card's material and color are meant to change as a rank improves, yet it has remained that of the lowest class, unchanged since he first received it. Seeing the basic card, the soldiers exchange glances. One advises him to learn some survival skills in the nearby forest before attempting to enter the devil's nest. The young man breaks into a nervous sweat, wondering if they are mocking him. Ignoring their condescension, he presses onward, entering the dense, dark woods that mark the edge of his new property. As he ventures deeper, he consults a map and reflects that this forest is now his. He finds it surprisingly peaceful, musing that the demonic realm isn't as filled with monsters as he had been led to believe. That fleeting sense of peace is shattered by a sudden, violent noise from nearby. He turns to see a bear of monstrous size rearing up on its hind legs, letting out a ferocious roar. At the same time, a hornet large enough to be a monster in its own right buzzes aggressively in the air. Terror seizes him. He identifies the creatures as a wild bear and a Vespa hornet, and the chilling realization hits him. He would stand no chance if they were to attack him now, but the beasts are not focused on him. The bear, its eyes glowing with rage, roars at the giant hornet as the insectoid creature prepares to strike, locking the two behemoths in a deadly confrontation. He cautiously emerges from the foliage, approaching the fallen Vespa hornet. The forest is silent once more. He wonders if the battle is truly over. His initial worry gives way to a sharp grin of opportunity. Seeing the giant monsters had been terrifying, but this outcome was unexpectedly lucky. He decides to gather materials from the carcass. From within the creature, he extracts a gleaming, multifaceted magic stone. A fine prize. The harvest from the hornet yields the stone, along with arthropod eyes and feathers. Such magic stones are the source of a monster's power. It is known that monsters and demons use these internal stones, each possessing unique properties, to manipulate magic and fuel their special abilities. He inspects the hornet's body further, noticing its venomous stinger is missing. He recalls a lesson from his Adventurer's Guild course. This type of magic stone should have a poison effect. His instructor had explained that unlike monsters, humans don't have magic stones in their bodies and must gather magic from nature. The memory triggers a sudden realization. His eyes widen as a new possibility dawns on him, and he turns his gaze deeper into the woods. Following his hunch, he finds the carcass of the giant bear. Just as he thought, the massive creature lies dead, foam dripping from its mouth. He confirms that the bear was poisoned. Wasting no time, he decides to harvest what he can, planning to cut the meat, skin the fur, and dry them. He gathers the fur and as much meat as he can carry. After 3 more days of trekking deep into the forest, he finally stops. A weary but satisfied smile spreads across his face. He has arrived. He stands upon a ridge, looking out over a vast, untamed expanse of trees and wilderness. With a sense of finality and purpose, he declares that this is his land. He stood at the edge of his new domain, observing the clear demarcation line. The river, he noted, marked the boundary of his land, and the ecosystem on the other side was distinctly different. The view before him was vast, a sprawling forest stretching towards distant, snow-capped mountains under a wide-open sky. His initial surprise gave way to determination. Deciding that anything was fine for a start, he resolved to take the first step into his new life. As his boots splashed into the shallow water of the river, the surface nearby began to bubble and churn. A small, gelatinous form coalesced from the water, rising up from the riverbed. He looked down at the quivering creature with a bead of sweat on his brow. Just to be certain, he asked aloud if it was a slime. Feeling lightheaded, the young man realizes his magic must be drained. He understands that if he's attacked again, he'll faint from exhaustion. His only option is to use a ranged weapon to strike the slime's core. With determination, he poises his farming hoe, ready to attack the creature. He swings, but the attack misses its mark. To his shock, the head of the hoe sizzles and completely dissolves upon contact with the slime's body. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he prepares to strike again with what's left of his tool. The slime seems to react, its gelatinous form quivering. The creature finally bursts, splashing its viscous fluid all over him. He spits out the foul liquid, relieved that he managed to defeat it. He assesses the materials obtained from the battle. The wild bear pelt he was carrying was wasted, but he did acquire a single magic stone from the slime, though its effect is unknown. He concludes that the fight was not very profitable. Pushing aside his disappointment, he resolves that this is no time to feel down. With dusk approaching, he knows he must set up camp and ventures deeper into the dense forest. As he walks, he observes that the forest is full of plants he's never seen before. He muses that with some tree branches and leaves, he could fashion a makeshift tent for the night. He stops to inspect a large frond. When he cuts it, a slimy liquid oozes out. The plant is identified as a palm leaf. Continuing his survey of a local flora, he finds a tough, segmented plant. It is identified as bengrass. His search yields another discovery. He cuts the stem of a large, round leaf identified as butterbur, and is surprised when fresh water sprays out from the cut. He ventured deeper into the unfamiliar woods, his exploration bringing him to a strange clearing. To his surprise, it was a field of white flowers, an unexpected sight in a dense jungle. As he drew closer, a grim detail emerged from the beautiful scene. Scattered amongst the blossoms were the skeletal remains of various creatures, including what looked like the corpse of a monster. A sense of unease washed over him. Something felt dangerously wrong about this place. He decided to deal with the mystery of the flower field later, prioritizing the immediate need to set up camp before nightfall. Under the starry sky, his makeshift shelter was beginning to take shape beside a crackling fire. As the warmth pushed back the darkness, a sharp pang of hunger gnawed at him. He was glad he had managed to secure the wild bear meat. It sizzled over the flames, its aroma filling the small clearing. He took a large, satisfying bite. As he ate, he reflected on the harsh realities of this new environment. The plants and animals here were not simple. He resolved that tomorrow he would need to begin investigating his surroundings while figuring out his life. Suddenly, from the shadows just beyond his fire, a low growl revealed a glimpse of sharp, menacing fangs. He froze, his eyes darting towards the sound. 2 luminous eyes glowed in the darkness. Their size and height from the ground suggested a creature of considerable power. The beast stepped out of the undergrowth, its powerful form revealed in the firelight. A wave of dread washed over him as he recognized it, a green tiger. As the tiger stalked closer, a memory of the Adventurers Guild instructor's stern warning echoed in his mind. She had stated unequivocally that to encounter a green tiger while unarmed was to prepare to forfeit one's life. He makes a desperate gambit, tossing a piece of meat toward the massive beast and commanding it to eat the poisoned offering. The green tiger simply stares, first at the meat, then back at him, utterly unimpressed. The plan is not working at all. A cold sweat breaks out on his brow as he realizes the creature must prefer fresh meat. As his fist clenches in frustration, the tiger's eyes glow with predatory intent. With a powerful surge, the beast lunges forward. He cries out in alarm, seeing the attack coming straight for him. He throws himself sideways, crashing through the dense undergrowth in a desperate attempt to evade the pounce. The evasion is not enough. The tiger's massive, fanged maw appears right beside him, letting out a deafening roar that mirrors his own scream of pure terror. Its claws extend, swiping through the air as it closes the final distance for the kill. But just as the blow is about to connect, the creature's assault suddenly halts. The massive tiger stumbles and collapses, rolling onto its back in a heap. Watching the beast fall, a grin of relief spreads across his face. The poison had hit its target after all. His relief is tragically short-lived. The green tiger, now enraged, struggles back to its feet with a furious roar. He turns and flees into the darkness of the forest. He collapses behind a tree, trembling from the terrifying ordeal. He truly thought he was a goner. For such a disaster to strike on the very first day of his new life, he feels, leaves no hope for the future. He collapses, hands digging into his hair as a wave of despair washes over him. The sound of snapping branches cuts through his anguish. Peeking from behind a tree, he realizes with dawning horror that the sounds are getting louder, closer. Panic sets in. He concludes that he can't win this fight. It's too dangerous. His only thought is to abandon this place, run back to the village, and quietly start over. But the thought gives him pause. Start over? What could he possibly do? His mind flashes back to the disdain he faced in town. He remembers a woman asking how long he intended to cling to the place, and the scorn from other adventurers who dismissed him as a useless amateur, complaining that being an adventurer had become boring with such pointless jobs. The memory brings tears to his eyes. He knows running away won't make anything better. He has no other choice. This is all he has left. A grim determination settles over him as he sits with his axe. This wasteland, this life, it's all that's left for him. With this new resolve, he climbs a tree. Spotting the green tiger sniffing the ground below, he calls out to it, getting its attention. The beast's head snaps toward the sound. It turns, letting out a furious roar that shakes the trees. Its roar cuts short. The tiger's snarl falters, its eyes widening in sudden confusion and alarm. The beast stood bewildered amidst a field of white flowers, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow upon its striped fur as leaves drifted down around it. From his perch in a nearby tree, the young man watched, his heart pounding. He knew it was approaching, and a single miscalculation would mean his death. Below, the tiger let out a deep, guttural sound, its massive jaws agape. He watched intently as the creature stumbled forward, not with aggression, but with a strange lethargy. Its claws scraped against the tree trunk as it struggled to stay upright. Its eyes glazed over, and with a final, fading roar, the massive beast collapsed. It landed softly in the bed of flowers and quickly fell into a deep slumber, leaving the young man to look on in relieved disbelief. A triumphant smile spread across his face. His gamble had paid off. The flower garden was indeed a natural trap. He understood now. The mysterious white blossoms carpeting the forest floor must possess a powerful, sleep-inducing agent. Realizing the danger to himself, he quickly covered his mouth and nose, carefully making his way down the tree to avoid inhaling the potent pollen. His victory was complete. He stood over the fallen beast, holding its severed head as a trophy. From the creature, he had obtained valuable materials, its meat and a magic stone of unknown properties. But his triumph was short-lived. Overcome with a ravenous hunger that had been gnawing at him since before the encounter, he tried to eat the tiger's meat, only to find it utterly inedible. He collapsed onto the ground, the exhaustion and hunger finally overwhelming him. All he could think of was the desire for a proper, delicious meal. He sits alone in the quiet of the night, the warmth of a small campfire doing little to ward off the desolation. Under a vast, star-dusted sky and a full moon, he stares into the flames, a grim thought solidifying in his mind. After everything, this place is his hell. A young man finds himself disoriented on a crowded street in a dense, modern city. Towering buildings and unfamiliar signs surround him as he questions where he is and what has happened. His gaze sweeps across the endless stream of people, a stark contrast to anything he knows. He can only think about how many individuals are packed into this one place. The scene shifts to a dark room where his silhouetted form reaches toward a glowing screen. He stares at his own reflection, still questioning the nature of this strange place. With a sudden gasp, he jolts awake. His eyes are wide with the lingering shock of the vision as he finds himself back in a dense forest, sitting beside the wreckage of a makeshift shelter. He gets to his feet, looking out at the vast, mountainous landscape. He realizes with a sense of weary familiarity that it was all just a dream. Stretching his arms, he reflects that it's a dream he's had countless times since he was a child, always leaving him to wonder about the location of that strange, crowded world. His contemplation is cut short by a squelching noise. He turns to see a translucent slime crawling over his backpack, and he cries out in alarm for his belongings. With a curse, he reacts instantly, grabbing a nearby hatchet and striking the creature with a swift, decisive blow. Afterward, he kneels and inspects his bag, relieved to find it safe. The fact that he defeated the slime in a single hit makes him wonder if he is growing stronger. His expression hardens with resolve. Adjusting his pack, he steels himself, ready to continue exploring the hostile wilderness he considers a hell. He ventures deeper into the forest, a bead of sweat on his brow. He resolves to at least understand the layout of this land, which he now considers his own. His exploration is cut short as he comes across a startling sight. A massive, snake-like creature with the upper body of a woman, slumped against a tree. He cautiously observes the creature, noting her deathly stillness. He recognizes her as a lamia and finds it strange, as such beings are known for their strength. Upon closer inspection, he discovers the cause of her demise, a poisoned Vespa hornet stinger lodged in her mouth. He understands now, this was the result of the poison meat he'd used against the green tiger. Seeing this as a stroke of luck, he carefully extracts the lamia's magic stone as a valuable material. With the new material secured, he sets a new goal for the day, to venture deeper into the area known as the Swayman grass. As he walks, a cluster of large mushrooms catches his eye. A fleeting thought of whether they are edible crosses his mind, but he quickly decides against it, reminding himself that approaching unknown flora in this dangerous place without proper testing is reckless. An idea for a test subject presents itself. He swiftly catches a small, scurrying rodent. Holding the creature, which he dubs a forest rat, he prepares his experiment and tosses it towards the base of the mushrooms. The small animal nibbles on one of the fungi, which instantly releases a large puff of spores into the air. The rat is racked with violent convulsions before falling completely still. He watches the outcome, confirming that his caution was justified. The creature is no longer moving. He surveyed his surroundings with a weary expression, sweat beading on his brow. It seemed the forest was full of natural traps. He identified another one, plants that released paralyzing spores. There was no room for carelessness here. The thought of traps sparked an idea. He realized he could use one himself. He immediately set to work, digging into the earth. For someone like him, without proper combat training, using traps was the only viable way to fight the monsters of this land. A pitfall trap began to take shape. His resolve hardened, sweat dripping from his face as a single thought echoed in his mind. He would survive. With that determination fueling him, he finally finished digging the large pit. He carefully placed the swayman flower and the poisonous mushroom inside as bait before collapsing onto the grass, utterly spent. He lay there, completely drained, the pangs of hunger gnawing at him. He felt he couldn't move another step today. But after a moment's rest, curiosity and the hope of a meal overcame his exhaustion. He pushed himself up, turning his gaze toward the pit he had dug. It was time to see what was going on. Standing before the felled beast, the young man could only stare in awe. The sheer scale of the wild boar was immense, dwarfing him completely as it lay motionless on the forest floor. He approached its massive head with caution, realizing with a start that it was merely sleeping. The thought did little to calm his nerves. A creature this large was a threat, awake or not. Stealing himself, he decided to finish it. With a final decisive swing of his axe, the deed was done. He let out a breath of relief. Though he knew the real work was just beginning, butchering the carcass would take the entire day. As he carved into the boar's flank, his knife struck something unexpected. He pulled back to find a blue snake coiled within the creature's stomach, prompting him to recoil in surprise. He couldn't help but wonder about the bizarre ecosystem of this land. By the time he finished the monumental task, darkness had fallen. He had successfully harvested the wild boar's fangs, fur, meat, and even a magic stone from its remains. Exhausted but satisfied, he roasted a large cut of the fresh meat over a fire. It had been a long time since he'd had a proper meal, and he savored every delicious bite. After his meal, he inspected his tools. Both the axe and the knife he brought were now completely dulled. In their current state, he couldn't gather materials or fight effectively. His gaze then fell upon the boar's large, sturdy bones. They looked strong enough to be useful. Putting his new idea into practice, he took one of the large bones and began striking it against a rock, chipping away at it to forge a crude weapon. He held up his handiwork, a heavy bone club. It was simple, but he judged it would be good enough for now. With the club finished, he turned his attention to replacing his axe. He poured thick tree sap into a clay mold he had prepared, explaining to himself that it would solidify to become as hard as stone. While it set, he gave a new club a few practice swings, noting its considerable weight, but finding it easy enough to handle. He held the newly crafted axe, its head gleaming with a satisfying heft. A sense of accomplishment washed over him. His work was complete. The axe and a matching knife, both fashioned from the materials of the forest, lay finished before him. He had been so engrossed in the task that he hadn't noticed the passage of time. Looking up, he was startled to see the morning sun filtering through the trees, realizing he had worked through the entire night without a trace of fatigue. Surveying his surroundings with satisfaction, he noted that he had finished his work much more quickly than on the previous day. He flexed his fingers, a question forming in his mind. Was he getting stronger? He wondered if it was the boar meat he had eaten, or simply the result of repeating the task. He couldn't be sure, but then, a confident smile spread across his face. He accepted this new reality. No matter how hard he had tried before, he could never gain strength. Now, something had fundamentally changed. The next day dawned over the mountainous landscape. He set out once more, venturing deeper into the wilderness to continue his exploration. His path led him to the base of a cliff, where he discovered the dark, gaping maw of a cave. Announcing his presence as he entered, he stepped into the darkness. His eyes quickly fell upon an object mounted on the wall, a metal torch. The discovery was startling. He wondered if someone lived here. He ventured deeper, the torchlight revealing a chamber that had been carved from the rock. It was furnished with a simple table and what looked like alcoves for sleeping, a clear sign of habitation. As he scanned the room, he noted the clear traces of past inhabitants. Yet, the air was still and silent. The place felt long deserted. Despite the feeling of abandonment, he pressed onward, his torch a lone point of light pushing back the oppressive darkness of the winding passage. Then, as he rounded a corner, his eyes widened in sudden shock at what lay ahead. Before him, seated in a large, throne-like chair, were the remains of a person, a skeleton clad in tattered robes, its bony fingers still clutching a thick, bound book. The sight was unnerving. The empty sockets of the skull stared blankly forward. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple as he took in the grim scene. His attention, however, was drawn to the object in the skeleton's grasp, a leather-bound book with ornate markings and the initials PJ embossed on its cover. He cautiously reached out to take it. The moment his fingers brushed against the book, the skeleton's arm, brittle with age, crumbled into a cloud of fine dust. With the book now free, he opened it. He quickly realized it was a diary, its pages filled with detailed records of monsters, edible plants, and medicinal herbs. As he flipped through the pages, he understood its immense value. This was not just a diary. It was a survival guide, filled with vital information for living in these parts. He opened the diary, his eyes scanning the pages filled with unfamiliar diagrams and script. He wondered what he had found. As he read on, he found mentions of ruins in the demonic realm, though the specifics were frustratingly absent. The text suggested the guardian of these ruins was engaged in some kind of battle. He learned of a grim reality. A gigantic monster was said to appear every 3 months, a creature against which neither brute force nor conventional magic would prevail. The author stressed that mastery of space-time magic was essential, as common sense from current magical texts was useless here. The ancient magic circles described were apparently far more advanced than anything from modern times. He pieced it together. The diary's author, PJ, had been researching this very place. But the concepts were so advanced, he struggled to comprehend them. The full weight of the information settled upon him, his eyes widening in disbelief. He turned his gaze to the skeletal remains of the diary's author, offering a solemn rest in peace. Looking around the cave, he noted the impressive collection of gear left behind, a warehouse filled with unfamiliar metals, and knives and armor that appeared to be self-made. It was clear that PJ must have been an incredibly skilled adventurer. The evidence of such skill and preparation only deepened the mystery. He wondered aloud how a man like that could have possibly died here. He let out a breath, deciding that as curious as he was about PJ, some things would have to remain a mystery. For now, he resolved to be grateful for finding this shelter. With a new plan in mind, he decided to move his camp here. He turned and began running with purpose. He looked upon his new domain with a growing sense of purpose. His dreams for this place were expanding. He would make a home around this cave, turning it into a proper base, a beautiful place. His first task was to tidy up the messy room. Then, he would repair what was salvageable and craft whatever was missing using the materials available to him. After some work, he surveyed the newly organized space. A stone forge stood ready, and a wooden workbench was cleared. He nodded in satisfaction, deciding it was good enough for now. With the interior organized, he stepped outside and then back in, formally announcing his return to his new home. He acknowledged with a slight smile that, of course, no one was there to welcome him. He settles into a chair, a warm cup in his hands. He reflects that being free from any troublesome human relationships suits him just fine. The solitude was a comfort. 2 soldiers, breathing heavily, struggled against an unseen foe. One cursed their situation, wondering why a wild bear was in this area, while urging his comrade to seize an opening and finish the fight. Their target, a massive wild bear, suddenly reared up before them, letting out a ferocious roar that shook the forest and startled the 2 men. Faced with this overwhelming threat, one soldier stammered to his captain that it was impossible. The captain, however, knew they had no choice. If they didn't defeat the beast here, it would head towards the main road. He steeled his resolve, declaring, "Let's do this." Just as they prepared to re-engage, a hooded figure landed silently between them and the bear, his sudden appearance startling the soldiers. "Excuse me," the stranger said calmly. He rose to his feet, turning to the soldiers. Observing their predicament, he asked, "You seem to be in trouble. Can I help you?" One of the soldiers demanded to know who he was, dismissing him as a mere civilian. The hooded man remarked that in this cursed land, even strong people couldn't handle a wild bear. With the beast looming behind him, he then casually proposed, "Shall we take it down?" Without waiting for a reply, he launched into action. The bear roared and swiped, but the stranger moved with incredible speed, crossing his twin blades to deflect the blow as he focused on dodging its powerful attacks. His strategy was precise. Avoid the creature's tough skull and target its softer parts. He vaulted over another attack, landing lightly on the beast's own arm to position himself for a strike. In a flash, he delivered a fatal slash across the bear's neck. As blood erupted from the wound, his hood fell back, revealing the face of a determined young man who stood calmly amidst the aftermath of his swift victory. The two soldiers who had struggled so desperately just moments before could only stare, their faces frozen in expressions of pure, unadulterated shock. Still processing the young man's display of power, the soldier cautiously asks if he is from the training facility. The warrior simply offers a greeting in return. He ignores the soldier's question about his identity, instead asking if the man has any wheat or vegetable seeds to trade for monster meat or magic stones. The soldier, taken aback by the request, confirms that such supplies are available back at the facility, much to the young warrior's delight. He adds a further request, asking if it would be possible to also exchange for charcoal and paper. The trade is a success. He acquires a roll of paper, a writing implement, and 2 full sacks of supplies. Now alone, he walks through the woods, reflecting that while he is accustomed to life in this cursed land, there are still many places he has yet to explore. He resolves to make maps, remembering the soldier's surprised reaction to his presence. He pauses, looking at his blade, and wonders when he became so powerful. He concludes it must be a result of being forced to survive in a land surrounded by formidable enemies. His introspection is cut short by a sudden realization. He's been so focused on hunting that he hasn't bathed in some time, and he worries about his own stench. He finds a stream and wades in, washing away the grime of the wilderness. The cool water is refreshing. Feeling renewed, he stands in a cleared patch of land, holding a farming tool. With the vegetable seeds he acquired, he considers that it might be time to begin serious farming. He raises a heavy mallet, preparing to drive a post into the ground. He acknowledges to himself that there's a great deal of work to be done. As he began his work, his attention was drawn to a staggering sight. A tortoise of colossal size, its shell like a small hill, emerged from the landscape, dwarfing the surrounding trees. His awe quickly turned to panic. He yelled at the creature, warning it not to come closer and ruin his fledgling farm. Gripping his axe, he resolved to drive the massive beast away. In his frantic rush to confront it, his footing gave way in the wet earth, and he was sent tumbling into a patch of mud. He sat up, covered in grime, lamenting that he had just washed. The giant tortoise simply paused, observing him with a placid gaze. His frustration mounting, he scrambled to his feet, raised his axe, and charged, shouting that he would not forgive the intrusion. The creature's massive leg began to shift in the water. The tortoise swung its powerful limb with surprising speed. He threw himself backward, just in time, narrowly avoiding the crushing force of the blow. Having made its point, the creature turned and swam away, leaving him standing alone in the water. He watched it go, realizing that if it had truly been hostile, he would have simply become its next meal. Sometime later, however, his expression was one of pure bliss as he savored a mouthful of tender, cooked meat. While enjoying a bowl of soup, he consulted PJ's notebook. He found an entry on turtles, learning that the meat is delicious and makes for an irresistible soup. The creature was identified as a haze turtle, and the notes mentioned that once caught, it could even be kept as a pet. The entry concluded with a startling revelation. Within the Curse land, the haze turtle was considered to be a very weak creature. He set his sights on a new objective. With renewed determination, he declared that his exploration target for the day was the sea. As he prepared, he noted the large quantity of meat he had processed, realizing he was nearly out of salt. He lamented that he should have asked the soldiers for a supply. His approach was methodical. While drawing maps of the new territory, he searched for a river from the top of a hill, reasoning that following its course would eventually lead him to the ocean. His strategy paid off. Cresting a rise, he saw the vast expanse of water and exclaimed in triumph, "The sea." Reaching the coast, he updated his map, musing that even this cursed land has a proper end. He decided to gather salt from the seawater, but his attention was suddenly caught by something lying on the distant shore. He squinted, his curiosity turning to disbelief. It was the form of a person, half submerged in the gentle surf. He questioned if it could truly be another human. As the waves receded, the figure was revealed to be a young woman with long, pale hair, lying unconscious on the wet sand. A soft, barely audible sound escaped her lips. His eyes widened in shock at the unexpected discovery. Kneeling on the beach, the young man cradles an unconscious elf girl, his expression etched with worry. He realizes she is barely holding on, and a wave of anxiety washes over him as he admits to himself that he has no tools to treat her. He questions whether it is wise to get involved at all. His internal conflict intensifies. This is his territory, he thinks with frustration, and now he has to deal with trespassers on top of demons. Despite his concerns, he sets up a small fire on the shore, the elf girl still lying nearby. He tries to convince himself to ignore the situation, reasoning that he only came to make salt and should pretend he saw nothing. A bead of sweat rolls down his face, betraying his unease. Suddenly, he snaps, shouting at himself in tearful frustration for his own inaction. As he berates himself, a monstrous, T-Rex-like creature bursts from the nearby foliage, charging directly toward him. Spurred into action, he begins forcefully grinding leaves into a paste with a mortar and pestle. He gently applies the resulting poultice to the elf girl's lips. Afterwards, he sits and eats some of the mixture himself, noting that while it's considered food for forest rats and tastes terrible, it effectively restores one's energy. Having done all he can for her immediate recovery, he stands and observes the setting sun. With the elf now resting more peacefully against a rock, he determines their next course of action. They need to find food. As night falls, he successfully prepares a meal of grilled giza crab over a fire. He savors the taste, remarking on how delicious it is, especially the rich miso inside. He is startled from his meal by a soft sound. The elf girl is now awake and standing just behind him, uttering a faint sound of discomfort. He realizes with a jolt that he had become completely absorbed in eating the crab. Her eyes are wide open, fully conscious and fixed upon him. The mysterious girl, now awake and wrapped in a covering, shivers slightly as she watches the protagonist cook fish over fire. Noticing her intense gaze, he offers her a piece on a stick, asking if she wants to eat. She accepts the food without hesitation, her eyes widening with delight as she takes a large, enthusiastic bite. The protagonist watches her, a bead of sweat on his brow, slightly taken aback by her voracious appetite. After she has eaten, he addresses her directly, stating that he doesn't know where she came from, but this demonic realm, this Makio, is his precious land. He requests that she leave this cursed place promptly. She seems to misunderstand, latching onto the word Makio and repeating it as if it were her name. He begins to correct her, but she says it again with a bright smile. Realizing she doesn't understand his words and that it would be too troublesome to explain, he gives up. He then asks for her actual name. Deciding to go by Makio, she then points to herself with a cheerful expression and introduces herself with a single word, share. Still chewing, Makio asks if there is any more food. He apologetically informs her that there is none left, which she seems to understand, repeating his words back to him as he confirms it. Her expression turns somber for a moment as she quietly repeats the word, none, processing the fact that the meal is over. Changing the subject, he asks the more important question of how she arrived here. She considers how to explain, then picks up a stick, deciding to communicate through drawings in the sand. She gestures toward her finished drawing on the beach, speaking in her unfamiliar tongue. The protagonist stares, a sweat drop forming on his temple as he comprehends the immense scale of her depiction, exclaiming, "It's that big!" Through her crude sketches, she conveys that there was a conflict among the demons. He struggles to follow, admitting to himself that he doesn't understand most of it. He can only ask in disbelief how she managed to escape something like that. He sat by the fire, attempting to boil seawater to make salt, but questioned the inefficiency of his method. The horned girl, Makio, watched him with a look of pure confusion. In response to his struggle, she simply extended a hand, conjuring a large, crackling sphere of dark energy. The sudden display of power left him stunned. The water in the pot erupted into a violent boil as he stared, wide-eyed, realizing it was magic and marveling at the sphere's immense size. His shock turned to panic as the fire beneath the pot suddenly raged out of control. He yelled in alarm while Makio knelt nearby, a smug look on her face as she asked if he wasn't going to tend to the flames. Later, after the fire was managed, he lay wrapped in a blanket, watching her sit by the embers. He couldn't help but think that the situation was becoming increasingly strange. As the night wore on under a crescent moon, a new idea formed in his mind. If she was planning to stay in his demonic realm, perhaps she could teach him magic in exchange for room and board. His thoughts were interrupted by the morning sun. He awoke to find Makio clinging to him tightly in her sleep, much to his surprise. He wondered what had become of her duty to watch the fire. Looking over at the pot, he saw the result of her efforts, a massive pile of pure, white salt. With the salt secured, he gently woke the girl, calling her share. He reflected that tasks were certainly faster with two people, and then made a decision, inviting her to come to his house. As they walked through the woods, he considered his plan. He would let her stay for a while, but eventually, he'd have her build a boat so she could leave. His thoughts were cut short by Cher's boundless energy as she excitedly pointed out a frog. He led her towards the dark entrance of a cave carved into the mountainside, a sight that stirred a flicker of memory, reminding him of his old self. Inside, the space was surprisingly domestic, with a simple wooden table, benches, and a stone furnace built into the earthen wall. As they stepped through the entrance, he announced his return. A small, gelatinous slime bounced in greeting, welcoming him home. The horned girl, however, was utterly captivated, her eyes sparkling with wonder at the sight. Her wonder quickly turned to unrestrained joy. She threw her arms up, shouting, "I'm home," with an infectious enthusiasm that caught him completely off guard. He had to remind her that this was, in fact, his house. She immediately began to explore, her curiosity leading her to his armor. He quickly chided her, telling her to stop touching his things without permission. He then pointed out a caged forest rat, explaining it was for experimental purposes, and a fireplace, which he used for baking bread. The long walk from the demon realm had clearly taken its toll. He turned to find she had already collapsed onto his sleeping spot, fast asleep. Watching her sleep, he began to reconsider his impulsive decision. He had brought her here on a whim, thinking she might be useful, but now he saw she might just be a burden. Worse, if anyone discovered he was harboring a demon, he would certainly be arrested. She slept soundly, oblivious to his internal conflict, a trickle of drool escaping her parted lips. His gaze hardened with resolve. He made up his mind. He preferred living alone in the demon realm. As soon as she woke up, he would send her back. He decided there was no need to wait until morning. Reaching out, He resolved to wake her immediately and explain the situation properly. As his hand drew near, she stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring her name, Makio. Tears began to stream from her closed eyes as she continued to speak, her dream filled with fragmented words. Frog. Chef? None. He froze, his eyes widening in sudden realization. A memory flooded his mind, of his own past, of being an outcast with nowhere to truly belong. He saw in her the same desolation, understanding that she, too, was in the same situation with no place to call home. The hand that had been about to shake her awake slowly clenched into a resolute fist. Instead of waking her, he gently pulled the fur blanket higher, covering her sleeping form. He turned away, gazing out at the dense forest. This strange encounter, he realized, marked the beginning of a peculiar new life for them both, a human and a demon, together in a cursed land. The horned girl, Cher, is completely out of breath, sweat beading on her face as she struggles to move forward. The protagonist, Makio, turns to look back at her as she pants his name, her voice strained with effort. He watches her fail to outpace even a large, flightless bird, observing that she has very little stamina. He states plainly that without it, she won't survive in this demon land. After the creature is dealt with, he looks on as she collapses to the ground. She laments that she's too much of a burden to even explore properly. Her eyes widen as he makes a sudden declaration. He will train her. His first instruction is for her to test her agility by catching as many of the small forest rats in the area as she can. She leaps into action, diving and scrambling after the nimble creatures with fierce determination, though her movements are unrefined and she tumbles in the dirt. A moment later, she beams with pride, holding up the tail of a rat she successfully caught, despite the tear welling in her eye and the dirt on her face. He considers her success for a moment before announcing their next task, combat train. In an instant, she responds by unleashing a massive, violent explosion from her hands, demonstrating a shocking level of raw power. She struggles with her aim, squeezing her eyes shut as she prepares to cast. Her companion chides her for unleashing an unnecessarily large fireball, instructing her to make it more compact and aim carefully. He questions why she always closes her eyes, a habit that clearly hinders her accuracy. He grows more urgent, spotting the large, long-nosed creature tending to another on the ground. He warns her that carelessness will lead to her death and commands her to shoot immediately. In her haste, she fires wildly. The magical explosion erupts far from its target, the shockwave sending her companion tumbling through the air. He shouts in exasperation, demanding to know where she was aiming. The single spell fragments into multiple detonations, erupting chaotically all around her. She cries out as the uncontrolled power engulfs her position. Amidst the chaos, her companion realizes with surprise that one of the blasts found its mark. The creature roars in agony, its arms scorched and smoking from the impact. Despite the sloppy execution, she beams with pride, a smug expression on her face. Her companion watches her, unimpressed, finding her self-satisfaction rather irritating. The day's efforts stretch on until the sun finally dips below the horizon. As night falls, he carries the exhausted Cher on his back. He reflects grimly on their progress. It took the entire day to hunt a single emerald monkey. The future, he thinks, looks bleak, and this level of constant vigilance is unsustainable. Settled by the warmth of a campfire, he looks at her with determination. Realizing his own limitations, he makes a direct request. Cher, teach me magic. Her eyes widen in surprise, quickly replaced by a bright, eager smile as she happily agrees to his proposal. She takes his hands, clasping them together as she begins the lesson. A faint hum of energy passes between them. His eyes widen in shock as he feels the unfamiliar flow of power for the first time. He recognizes the sensation instantly. Something is flowing from Cher's hands into his, and, at the same time, something from him is flowing into her. He realizes with a start that this is magic power. As he processes this, Cher's focus deepens, her gaze steady as she senses the exchange. He murmurs that the feeling is incredibly strange. Cher's initial look of surprise softens into a calm, knowing expression. Her serenity shatters in an instant. She leaps back, shouting in frustration and waving her hands wildly. Confused, he asks what's wrong, but she ignores him, turning her anger on a group of nearby slimes and stomping them flat. After her outburst, she kneels before him, her frustration giving way to disbelief. She explains that his magic power is incredibly high, yet he doesn't use magic at all, lamenting what a complete waste it is. Her words give him pause. He strokes his chin thoughtfully, wondering when he could have acquired so much magic power. He speculates that it must be a result of his training and growth in the demon land. A memory surfaces, and his expression brightens with a sudden thought. He points a finger in the air, exclaiming that he can, in fact, use basic life magic, but he never paid it any mind since it has no use in combat. Eager to demonstrate, he extends his index finger and concentrates. A tiny, faint spark of light appears at the tip. Cher watches, letting out a long, thoroughly unimpressed sigh. Her voice echoed through the dense forest, explaining that magic is fundamentally about visualization. The protagonist, however, remained skeptical. He argued that it couldn't be so simple. One couldn't just conjure anything they imagined, like a person with magic alone. Despite his doubts, he focused intently, muttering the word visualization to himself. With a final cry of effort, a small flame flickered to life at the tip of his finger. He stared at it, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He now grasped the flow of magic, but immediately recognized the spell's weakness. It was small, slow to cast, and utterly unsuitable for combat. In a sun-dappled forest, the protagonist lays out the day's plan for his companion, Cher. They will defeat as many monsters as possible for training before heading back. Nearby, a large hornbill observes them from a tree branch. He decides they will take a challenging cliff route. Cher, looking uneasy, questions this choice, asking why they don't simply fly using wind magic. He dismisses her concern, asking if controlling her magic power is too difficult, and bluntly states that if it is, she will have to climb on her own. As she continues to object, he cuts her off, calling her noisy. He firmly reminds her, using her alias, Makio, that this difficult path is also part of the training. His lecture is interrupted as Cher, now calling herself Makio, runs forward with glee. A colossal moth with large, eye-spotted wings has appeared in their path. The protagonist identifies the creature and sees a perfect opportunity. He instructs Cher to try defeating the big moth by herself. Her initial excitement instantly vanishes, replaced by a terrified shriek. Despite her evident fear, she steels herself for battle. With a determined expression, she takes a combative stance as the giant moth looms over her, its massive form casting a shadow. Watching her, the protagonist's expression shifts as a sudden, troubling thought occurs to him. His realization comes too late. Cher is enveloped in an electric-like aura, her body seizing up from paralysis. He mutters an oops, belatedly wondering if she was hit by the moth's paralysis powder. With its target incapacitated, the giant moth flaps its wings, hovering over Cher's paralyzed form. It then turns its attention to the protagonist. Resigned to the situation, he prepares for battle as the creature lunges toward him, its long proboscis extended to strike. He rushes to Cher's side, asking if she is okay. She remains stunned, twitching from the lingering effects of the paralysis. He presents the magic stone recovered from the giant moth, asking if she wants it. Though still struggling to speak, her eyes light up as she manages to stammer out a request for the Makio, the magic stone. Realizing what she wants, he considers affixing the stone to a branch to create a staff. He promises to make it for her, telling her to wait while she sits patiently, clutching the precious stone. The result of his work is a new weapon, the big moth's magic stone staff, imbued with a powerful paralysis effect. Cher, now fully recovered, brandishes the staff with a joyful cry. He notes to himself that his creation was a big hit. With this new power in hand, Cher's triumphant march had just begun. She immediately puts it to use, confronting a giant, crackling hornet and thrusting the staff forward with a battle cry. The protagonist watches in awe as she unleashes a devastating combination of paralysis magic and an offensive spell, engulfing the creature in a fiery blast. Their new strategy proves highly effective. As they continue through the woods, Cher hums happily, swinging her new weapon. He looks on with approval. The next few days, they hunted monsters relentlessly with their paralysis combo, amassing a large pile of spoils from creatures like a massive slug beast. She bounds through the forest with newfound speed, expressing her delight at their faster pace. Following close behind, the protagonist observes the glowing magic in his hand, reflecting on how they've adapted to the demon hand. Their movements have completely changed, though he notes his own magic still requires time for visualization to activate. Suddenly, she points forward, calling out his name, Makio, to get his attention. He sees what has caught her eye, a group of imps perched menacingly on a thick branch. He cautions her to wait. Before he can react further, arcs of electricity erupt around the imps, shocking them. He urges her to back off, warning that there are too many to fight, but she is already deep in concentration, her hands poised to cast. Her spell connects, and the stunned creatures tumble helplessly from their perch. As they fall, a deep, guttural rumbling echoes through the trees, the sound vibrating through the very ground. The powerful sound startles them both, their heads snapping up in alarm. They discover the source. A colossal, ancient tree with a face etched into its bark lets out another deep groan. The monstrous tree looms over them, its immense form dominating the clearing. Cher quickly identifies the creature as a treant and launches an attack, which explodes against its face with little effect. The creature barely flinches. Realizing the immense power gap, the protagonist urgently tells her that this is not an opponent they can beat. They must run. He flees with all his might, carrying Cher on his back as the colossal treant's gnarled roots smash into the ground just behind them, relentlessly pursuing. As he runs, she clings to him, eyes squeezed shut in concentration, muttering the final words of an incantation. Her spell works. The paralysis begins to take effect on the creature. Still, one of its massive limbs swings down with terrifying speed. He cries out from the sheer force of the near miss as Cher, seeing the lingering danger, screams for him to run. The impact sends him tumbling to the forest floor. He pushes Cher away, weakly telling her to stay back as he struggles to recover. He insists with grim determination, urging her to run, to get away, even if it's just one step faster. She turns to flee, but seeing the treant's roots still surging forward, she immediately returns to his side, pulling him along and shouting for him to push just one step farther. Their desperate flight carries them some distance away. Looking back, Cher sees the treant has finally stopped, its roots now firmly planted in the earth. Suddenly, a heavy footfall lands nearby. He hoists her onto his back once more and continues his relentless pace, leaving the dense forest behind for the rocky foothills of a distant, snow-capped mountain. As he runs, a sudden realization brings him up short. A confused sound escapes his lips as his eyes widen. He skids to an abrupt halt, his boot digging into the unfamiliar terrain as he processes what he has just noticed. His sudden halt sent them both tumbling forward, crashing onto the dusty ground in a heap. Panting from the exertion, he and Cher looked back toward the forest's edge. The colossal treant remained motionless, its branches frozen in place by the strange, glowing rings of the paralysis spell. He turned to Cher, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. "Cher," he asked, his voice strained, "was that your magic?" She simply shook her head, her expression as bewildered as his own. The denial left him with a startling thought. Huh, did I use some kind of magic, he wondered aloud. Cher's eyes widened in surprise at the suggestion. At that moment, a memory surfaced. He recalled a mysterious board that had appeared in his dreams since he was young, a device from another world. It was through this board, he realized, that he had somehow learned the images of various magics, and the visualization for that paralysis spell had come to his mind instinctively. As he processed this revelation, Cher placed a hand on his head. A gentle, shimmering light enveloped him, and he immediately identified the sensation. "Recovery magic," he murmured. She beamed, her energy seemingly restored, and cheered. "Ah, drip, drip, drip." He straightened up, feeling his fatigue lessen. "Thank you," he said, but her strange chant left him puzzled. "How do you do recovery magic?" His question hung in the air over the desolate, rocky plains. He admitted to himself that he had no idea at all what her words meant, or what this recovery magic truly was. Makio focuses intently on the small knife in his hands, his brow furrowed in concentration as he prepares to channel his energy. His magic practice for the day begins. He attempts to imbue the blade with power, hoping to create a magic sword, but the coconut resin knife merely heats up before the flame sputters out. He realizes with a sigh that such a material is utterly useless for his purpose. This wasn't his first failure. He recalls trying various other materials harvested from demons, such as the horns of a hell beetle and the front leg of a pincer creature, but none of them were suitable conduits for his magic. The feeling of inadequacy is familiar, reminding him of a difficult time in the past with Cher. His thoughts are interrupted by Cher's voice calling his name, announcing that their food is ready. As he is startled from his reverie, he instinctively clenches his fist, and a brilliant light emanates from it. He slams his fist into the ground, unleashing a tremendous burst of raw power that shatters the earth around him in a wide crater. The shockwave of the impact leaves them both stunned, their eyes wide with disbelief at the sheer destructive force he just displayed. Cher breaks the silence, her voice a mix of alarm and awe. She demands to know what the noise was, wondering aloud if it could be a form of magic unknown even to the demon race, before simply exclaiming that it was amazing. Her words echo his own dawning realization. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple as he looks at his hand, thinking that he may have just made an incredible discovery. The discovery would have to wait, however, as the meal she had prepared, 2 large slabs of cooked meat, was ready near the mouth of their cave. Inside their cave dwelling, Makio attempts to cook, but Cher points out that his creation is raw. Dismissing his first try, he promises to make something proper for her to eat. He sets to work, and soon produces a stack of perfectly cooked, warm flatbread. The result is a stack of warm flatbread, which she eagerly accepts. Taking a large bite, her eyes light up as she exclaims how delicious it is. Makio, pleased, confirms that it's bread. As she eats, he watches her, glad she enjoys the food. He reflects that having an extra pair of hands is helpful for tasks like mapping the fields, but his expression turns serious as he considers that, eventually, he will have to send Cher back to where she came from. His thoughts on her future are set aside as they venture into the dense forest nearby. Within the woods, he explains their next task. They will chop wood together. Cher agrees enthusiastically, adding that they can build a ship so she can go home whenever she wants. He begins the work, swinging an axe against a thick tree trunk, but finds it to be a difficult task. A realization strikes him. If they had proper weapons instead of resin, they could create magic swords. This thought sparks a sudden memory. He recalls one of the mysterious metal weapons that belonged to the skeleton, PJ drawing the ornate short sword. He declares his intention to enchant it with wind magic and gives it a test swing. He channels wind magic into the blade and swings. The weapon unleashes a devastating blast of force, carving a perfectly smooth, wide tunnel straight through the dense forest, felling countless trees in an instant. The sheer power of the attack leaves him staggering. He stares forward, wide-eyed and utterly shocked at the unbelievable destruction he has just caused. In the wake of the devastating blast, Cher could only manage a nervous laugh as she watched him from a distance, the path of destruction stretching out before them. He, meanwhile, stared at the sword in his hand, sweating. He concluded that its magic conductivity was far too high, making it dangerously unpredictable. PJ's belongings were too risky to use recklessly. This weapon was no good for him. Setting the dangerous weapon aside, his attention returned to the task at hand. He observed the massive pile of felled trees, noting that while the shaping wasn't going well, they had certainly gathered plenty of materials for the ship in the end. He realized the problem might be that the wood wasn't dry. Until it was, there was nothing more they could do with it. With their work on the lumber paused, Cher called out his name, reminding him to be careful when hunting demons. He, in turn, decided it would be a good time to practice infusing magic into his own body instead of a weapon. He must have been deeply focused on his practice, as time seemed to fly by. Before he knew it, Cher was calling his name again, a stack of firewood in her arms, remarking that it was already time. She grinned mischievously, asking if he had brought any bread. Soon after, they sat together by a crackling campfire. As they ate, Cher remarked that this life, eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, wasn't a bad one at all. As they rested, a sudden, sharp sensation pierced through the calm evening, causing him to clutch his head. His eyes darted around. He felt an odd cold, and a strange noise reached his ears, putting him on high alert. He spun around as a massive hand suddenly seized Cher, lifting her off the ground. She let out a startled cry, caught completely off guard by the abrupt assault. Before he could react, another talon snatched him as well. A colossal, winged beast, a wyvern, had ambushed them, its leathery wings beating the air as it ascended. He could only shout in shock as the ground fell away beneath him. His eyes widened in terror, the wind whipping past his face as the creature carried them higher and higher over the snowy mountain peaks. He looked down at the distant, snow-covered terrain, a grim realization dawning on him. The situation was dire. They were far too high to even consider escaping. In stark contrast to his panic, Cher seemed almost delighted by the turn of events, identifying their captor with a calm smile. Makio watches in shock as the wyvern shrieks, a gaping wound torn into its side. He realizes with alarm that Cher has already launched her attack. The creature's agonized, thrashing flings him into the open sky. With no other option, he steels his resolve, determined to press the attack while airborne. He plummets towards the beast, focusing his energy and infusing his fist with the power of earth magic. He lands squarely on the wyvern's head, positioning himself for a decisive blow. With a powerful roar, he drives his stone-hardened fist directly into the creature's skull. The impact sends the mortally wounded wyvern hurtling towards the ground. To avoid being caught in the crash, Makio quickly channels wind magic to his legs to slow his own fall. He lands with a controlled crouch amidst the rocky terrain as the wyvern's body slams into the earth behind him, its tail snapping off from the force of the impact. His attention shifts to find Cher. He sees her suspended within a large sphere of water, a magical barrier that cushioned her fall. He looks on, impressed by her ingenuity. The water barrier dissolves, dropping Cher's limp body onto the ground beside the slain beast. As he approaches, Makio realizes with horror that she is drowned inside her own protective spell. He acts quickly, kneeling beside her and pressing firmly on her chest. A moment later, a gush of water erupts from her mouth as she gasps for air. Once she has recovered, they both stand and survey their new surroundings. The sun is setting on a vast, rocky wasteland. They are completely alone, with no supplies and no idea where they are. He and Cher take shelter from a raging sandstorm within a rocky alcove, a small orb of light pushing back the darkness. He resigns himself to their situation, concluding they will have to spend the night there. His concern grows as he checks on Cher, realizing she is burning with a high fever. She sweats and breathes heavily, clearly unwell. He wonders what he can possibly do, knowing the chances of finding medicine in this wasteland are non-existent. A sudden idea strikes him, and he pulls out the diary belonging to PJ. Frantically flipping through the pages, he finds an entry on imps. The text describes them as demons with faces like old men, but with female features, and crucially, it notes that their magic stones can be used as cold medicine. The information connects with a memory. He recalls that the imps were said to live alongside the treant. Looking out from a makeshift canopy he fashioned from a wyvern membrane, he confirms his destination. The treant and the imps were in the marshlands, a location quite far to the north of their current position. Without a moment's hesitation, he infuses magic into his legs and breaks into a full sprint, determined to run the entire distance. He blazes a trail across the barren lands and plunges into the deep woods. His search ends as he spots his targets from behind a tree. Two imps are crouched on the ground, hunched over some remains. He has found them. He explodes from his cover, his arm a blur as he strikes down one of the creatures before it can react. The imp shrieks as its companion turns in shock. Panting from the exertion, he kneels with the glowing demon stone in his hand. He knows time is short and urges himself to hurry back to Cher. Just as he prepares to leave, a deep, groaning rumble echoes through the forest. He looks up to find the source, a colossal treant, its ancient face regarding him from high above, blocking his path. He grits his teeth, a bead of sweat on his brow as he faces the colossal treant. There is no time for this. He has to get back. As a thick root whips out to block his path, he deflects it with a sharp kick, shouting that he doesn't have time for this interference. Clutching the imp's magic stone tightly, he plants his foot on another of the creature's limbs, demanding it to move as he prepares to launch himself forward. He propels himself through the air, roaring for the treant not to interfere as his fist smashes into a thick, woody branch with tremendous force. The impact sends splinters flying. The ancient, carved face of the treant contorts as a low groan rumbles from deep within its trunk. With a grunt of pure effort, He pushes forward, channeling all his energy into the blow. His fist begins to glow with an intense, overwhelming light. The release of power is immense, and a thunderous boom echoes across the entire forest, the shockwave tearing through the trees. In the immediate aftermath, a profound silence falls. The sky above is calm, dotted with clouds, betraying nothing of the violence that just transpired. The force of the blast has thrown him an unimaginable distance. The lush marshland is gone, replaced by a vast, arid wasteland of sun-bleached rock and sand. There, in the oppressive heat of this desolate landscape, he lies motionless under the shade of a weathered rock formation, the battle having taken its final toll. As he lay unconscious in the desolate wasteland, the one he fought for was losing her own battle. Cher's fever raged, sweat beating on her brow as she gasped for breath, her strength failing. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused, as the sound of a familiar voice cut through the delirium. It was Makio, standing in the doorway. He announced his return, a weary but triumphant smile on his face as he admitted his exhaustion. He wasted no time, approaching her with the prize from his battle. He urged that they use the demon's stone immediately. Weakly, Cher could only manage to utter his name as he held the glowing artifact out to her. As the stone's power took hold, she felt a strange, cold sensation. She watched as a dark energy seemed to be drawn from her body, wondering if this was the illness finally being purged. The effect was immediate. Color returned to her face, her eyes shining with newfound vitality. Seeing her transformation, he asked if it had worked. She beamed, exclaiming that it was amazing. He watched her, a look of profound relief washing over his features, glad that his efforts had succeeded. With her health restored, they set out from their shelter, walking together through the barren landscape. As she leaned against him, he playfully complained that her horns were poking him and told her not to cling so tightly. While the pair journeyed on, other forces were stirring elsewhere, at the very border of the demon land. A trio of determined adventurers stood poised for entry. A stern female warrior, a wizened old mage, and a hulking axeman, all ready to face the dangers within. Having crossed the border, the female warrior stands firm, her gaze sweeping across the new territory. Her hand rests on the strap across her chest as she takes in the surroundings, her expression a mixture of resolve and assessment. She speaks her thoughts aloud, confirming their arrival. So this is the Demon Land. A wide expanse of dense forest stretches out under a clear sky, with a few birds soaring high above the canopy. Nearby, Makio stands in a field, stretching his arms as he considers his plans for the day. He mulls over doing some work in the fields, perhaps using magic to draw water. His thoughts are interrupted when Cher calls out his name, catching his attention. She points towards the edge of the woods with a look of surprise, alerting him that there are people nearby. Following her gesture, they see a formidable party of 6 adventurers. A blonde knight in gleaming plate armor stands at the forefront, flanked by a fierce axe-wielding warrior, a focused swordswoman, a young archer, a martial artist, and a wizened wizard. From the cover of the foliage, Makio and Cher watch the group. He wonders what they're doing here and decides it is best to observe them for a while. Their observation begins as the armored leader and the swordswoman engage a large slime, the leader shouting for his party to attack the core while circulating magic. The fight proves difficult. The leader expresses his frustration, questioning the surprising strength of the monsters from the demon land, remarking that even an ordinary slime is proving to be incredibly strong. As Makio watches with a concerned expression, the adventurers' troubles escalate as they are set upon by a massive snake, forcing them into another desperate battle. He analyzes their chaotic tactics from his hiding spot. They use fire magic as bait before resorting to brute force attacks that are not only ineffective, but also fail to target the monster's core. He wonders if this level of incompetence is normal. His assessment proves correct, as he observes that the party is completely exhausted. Half of them seem to be running out of magic, with the leader, wizard, and archer all panting heavily from the prolonged, inefficient fight. He decides to step in, telling his companion that he will say something as the landlord. He walks toward the group of adventurers, calling out to ask what they're doing on his land. The blonde man in armor turns, startled by the sudden interruption. The leader proudly raises his sword, announcing that they are the adventurer party, White Lightning. He declares they came seeking strong monsters and assures Makio they will eliminate all of them. He calmly informs them that this is private property and they should not enter without permission, adding that it would be troublesome if they got hurt. In response, the party leader simply presents his adventure card. He continues, pointing out that if they're struggling with mere slimes, it looks like they might die if they venture deeper. The leader's face twists in anger, shouting that they are a renowned party in the city. Their argument is cut short by a sudden commotion from the surrounding forest, causing all 3 adventurers to look on in alarm. A massive, winged reptile bursts from over the tree line, swooping down towards another group of people in the distance. The adventurers stare in shock, one of them identifying the creature as a pseudo-dragon. Makio, however, simply notes that the party under attack managed to escape. As he watches the scene unfold, Cher tugs on his arm, reminding him that in the chaos, he forgot about her. Her words draw his attention to a young woman in armor, lying unconscious in a patch of flowers on the ground. The unconscious cleric lay on the forest floor, abandoned by her party. Makio and Cher observe the scene, with Makio pondering the trouble before him. A new idea began to form in his mind. Nearby, The dark, gaping maw of a cave entrance hinted at the dangers lurking within these lands. Turning his attention to their own affairs, Makio suggested to Cher that they should take their accumulated trade goods to the training facility. He added that they might as well leave the female cleric there as well. Cher responded with an enthusiastic cry of agreement. With their decision made, Cher finished her preparations, announcing that the packing was complete. Makio reminded her to cover her horns to avoid drawing unwanted attention. He then infused magic into his legs, and together they set off at a blistering pace. They soon arrived at a fortified trading post, where a man with a goatee watched their approach from behind the wooden gates. Upon their arrival, the man greeted them, recognizing Makio as someone from the demon land. He inquired about Cher, and Makio stated plainly that they had come to trade. The merchant's curiosity was piqued. Makio explained that while Cher was a bit unusual, her skills were reliable, and, with her help, they could make double the usual amount in their dealings. Laughing, the man remarked that things were getting interesting. He began to discuss the magic stones and materials Makio had brought, but then made an additional request. Could they also take in the girl who had collapsed in the demon land? He gestured to the same adventurer, now sitting up but still looking dazed. His attention then shifted to one of the items for trade. He held up a sword crafted from a single, curved fong, expressing his amazement that Makio had made it. He noted that the fong of a green tiger was an exceptionally rare material. The merchant then picked up a staff, judging it to be a decent product. Makio admitted that he had tried making it with magic stones, but was uncertain about the finer details of its construction. He continued his transaction with the merchant, making a specific request for a spellbook on space-time magic. In addition to the tome, he asked for some metal swords, sewing and woodworking tools, and a few sets of women's clothing. The merchant listened, then advised that it might be safer to travel to the capital city and search for it personally, warning that many expensive spellbooks are forgeries. Stroking his chin, the merchant pondered if such a book even existed, certain it would be costly regardless. Makio pressed, asking if it could be ordered from the capital. After a moment of consideration, he accepted the merchant's assessment. He understood the difficulty and decided he would search for the spellbook himself. The merchant confirmed the arrangement for the rest of the goods. He told Makio that the clothes would be sent over and to return in 1 week to collect them. The next day, Makio stands resolute, shouldering his pack. He declares his intention to begin searching for the ruins in the demon land, the very same ones mentioned in PJ's notebook. He is met with enthusiastic agreement from Cher, who raises a fist in the air, exclaiming that the treasures of ruins are a man's romance. His excitement quickly fades as a thought strikes him. He realizes that while PJ's notebook mentions the ruins, it crucially fails to specify their exact location, and he doesn't even have a proper map of the demon land. They consult the map they possess, which outlines the known territories. To the west lies the entrance to the demon land, and to the east is the sea where Cher was found. The north is an unexplored wilderness of mountains, and the south is similarly uncharted. With the south being the only viable, albeit unknown, direction, Makio decides their course of action. With Cher's cheerful agreement, they resolve to head south and investigate. They set off at a brisk pace, running across a barren landscape. After some time, the pair comes to a halt, standing together to survey the vast, empty expanse before them. He looks around, bewildered. The moment they left the forest, they were suddenly in a desert. He wonders if he missed the mark, as there is nothing but sand as far as the eye can see. His confusion is violently interrupted as the ground trembles and a colossal, thick tentacle erupts from the sand just ahead of them, arching high into the sky. They stare up in shock and disbelief. Cher, aghast, asks what the immense creature is, while Makio can only marvel at its sheer size. He quickly identified the beast from the notebook's pages. It was a sandworm. Despite its immense size, the text classified it as one of the weaker monsters, a fact that gave him pause. That classification seemed utterly wrong as the creature lunged, its cavernous mouth filled with rings of teeth, rushing toward them. Cher cried out, questioning how this could possibly be considered weak. In response, he drew his magic sword, its blade humming with energy as he prepared to meet the charge. He swung with all his might, bringing the enchanted steel down upon the monster's tough exterior. The blow barely scratched it. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw the blade had failed to pierce its thick hide. Realizing the magic sword was completely ineffective, Cher grabbed his arm and screamed for them to run away. They fled the desert, seeking refuge among the trees of a nearby forest. Having found a moment's respite, they collapsed, panting for breath. Makio frantically wondered about the creature's weakness and the identity of the notebook's author. PJ Cher, exhausted on the ground, urged him to search its pages for any means of defense. They found a safer spot to rest, while Cher recovered, nibbling on some food with the slime resting on her lap. He pored over the notebook, searching for a solution. His search yielded a discovery, a page detailing a complex magic circle. He realized he might have found a weapon decisively different from his own, its origins tied to a dark, foreboding cave. He decided to test it. Carefully replicating the magic circle from the notebook onto the ground, he placed his hand over it, preparing to channel his magic power through the intricate design. He pours his magic into the circle, and it erupts in a violent, dark explosion. Both he and Cher recoil in shock at the unexpected result. The power of the magic circle stuns him. It feels as though it's cutting through space itself. He examines his hand. Then the circle, trying to comprehend the force he just unleashed. This realization prompts a closer inspection of PJ's other belongings. It becomes clear that all of the deceased adventurer's weapons and armor have similar magic circles seamlessly integrated into their designs, hidden within the decorations. The craftsmanship is undeniable. He can only conclude that PJ was an incredibly skilled artisan, which only deepens the mystery of who and what he truly was. He voices his confusion to Cher, wondering aloud why such a talented person would die alone in the demon lands. He admits he has no clue. Cher simply looks at him, a hint of exasperation on her face as she calls him an idiot. Shaking off his contemplation, he declares his new resolve. He will take PJ's sword and seek revenge on the desert creature. But first, he tells Cher they need to head to the river to fetch water. The next morning arrives. As he sits by the river's edge, lost in thought, Cher calls his name, her voice cutting through his reverie. He turns, surprised by her interruption. Her call was not for him, but to draw his attention to a figure standing in the shallow water nearby. A woman with long, light hair stands there, her presence unexpected. He recognizes her immediately. It's the female cleric from the White Lightning party they encountered before. He asks if she needs something. She meets his gaze and makes a startling announcement. She has left the White Lightning. Introducing herself as Jennifer Volkov, she makes a desperate plea for him to take her in. Her plea was met with a blunt and immediate rejection. Makio turned away, stating simply, "No, I refuse." She pressed on, insisting he take her in. She argued her value, explaining that as a former cleric, she could treat injuries and illnesses. Furthermore, she had experience managing party supplies and, being from the north, was accustomed to the cold. Makio remained silent, wondering to himself why she would travel so far to this isolated land. He then voiced a pointed question, suggesting that perhaps she hadn't left her party so much as she had been fired from it. The accusation made her flinch. Her face flushed with color as she defensively retorted that her circumstances were none of his concern. He remained firm, explaining that since this was his land, he could not simply allow her to stay without understanding the full situation. A look of distress crossed her face. With her gaze lowered, she confessed the truth. Her former companions had told her she was no longer needed. With this admission, she repeated her plea to be allowed to live there. She then revealed she was an orphan with nowhere else to go. Makio, however, was not swayed. He pointed out that her explanation still felt incomplete and insisted she couldn't live there, urging her to return home or find a safer place than this dangerous, demon-infested land. She refused emphatically, her voice ringing with conviction as she declared that this very land was the place she had been searching for all along. With a dreamy expression, she elaborated, calling it an ideal, wonderful land with no one around, a place where she could never be betrayed again. Her words exasperated Makio, who loudly reminded her that he was, in fact, right there, and that it was his land she was praising. Completely ignoring his protest, she simply asked if he could guide her to a house. His frustration mounted as he demanded to know if she had heard a single word he had said. Makio sets the terms for the cleric's stay. He informs her that she will have to pay rent and, more importantly, must not cause a commotion about anything she witnesses in the demon land. She agrees without hesitation, her expression earnest. She assures him that she has already secured the necessary funds. As they walk through the woods, another woman warns the cleric to be wary of monsters. Almost immediately, she is startled by a harmless-looking slime, stumbling backward in fright. Later, inside a small dwelling, Makio reflects on the situation. He decides he will let her stay for a short time before sending her away, reasoning it would be troublesome if she were to die and transform into a monster. His thoughts are interrupted by a panicked shout from the cleric. She cries out, stammering that there's a demon nearby. Her alarm is directed at Cher, the horned girl, who calmly offers her a plate of pancakes. Makio looks on, exasperated, and reminds the cleric of her promise not to make a fuss. Ignoring their attempts to get his attention, he announces he is going to water the fields and walks off, taking a piece of bread with him. The cleric hurries after him, grabbing his arm. She questions why he is so calm, insisting that Cher is a dangerous demon. Makio tells her that Cher is a good person and to treat her with respect. The cleric protests that, as an enemy, Cher will be taken by the guards if discovered. He stops amidst the tall crops, turning to face her. He challenges her notion of an enemy, reminding her the war ended over a century ago. He then asks, pointedly, if persecuting the innocent is part of the church's teachings. With a simple gesture, he summons a stream of water to irrigate the field. He explains that Cher teaches him magic as her form of rent, adding that he has become quite proficient. He informs Jennifer that if she cannot pay the rent, she will have to leave. Unfazed, she brightly declares that she has 10 gold coins and asks if that will cover a month's stay. She then presents him with a formal document. He examines it, realizing it's a check, not physical currency. Jennifer confirms with a smile that it is indeed worth 10 gold coins. Her condescending sigh follows as she explains that in the capital, this form of payment is normal, attributing his confusion to him being from the countryside. This remark clearly won't do for him. He retorts that this is not the capital, and there are no money changers nearby. She confidently instructs him that any money changer will exchange it for gold coins. Realizing her check is useless here, she finally relents with frustration, shouting that she'll work for her keep. He begins to list potential chores like dishwashing or collecting firewood, and she puffs out her cheeks in annoyance. Her frustration gives way to a manic, determined expression. She internally vows to do whatever it takes, resolving to become the best in this hellish place, and eventually exact her revenge on those who wronged her. He watches her sudden outburst, noting her anger and dangerous talk of revenge. Concluding that she is not suited for the demon land, he bluntly tells her to leave. Startled, she asks what he means and if she said something rude. He confirms her fears, stating that he now understands why she was expelled from her party. She doesn't listen to others. He continues, pinpointing her flaw. She becomes angry when things don't go according to her plan. He delivers a stark warning that life in the demon land is not easy, and things will rarely go her way here. His words strike a nerve. Speechless, she turns and stomps away from him, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. She stood trembling, her face hidden by her hair, as Cher asked Makio if she was leaving. He confirmed with a simple, firm yes. He elaborated on his decision, stating that there was no place for a person like her here. She had come seeking revenge, a motivation ill-suited for this land. Looking out into the dense woods, he concluded that she would be far better off returning to the capital. Her enthusiasm cutting through the tension, Cher declared their plan for the day, to continue exploring the desert. She gestured towards his pack, reminding him not to forget PJ's sword. He acknowledged her point, explaining that because they would likely lose their bearings in the vast desert, he had already captured an essential creature to ensure their safe return. With Cher's encouragement, he revealed the creature, a leaf bird, already fast asleep inside its pouch. This particular species possesses a powerful homing instinct and falls asleep quickly in dark places, making it an invaluable guide. With their preparations complete, he adjusted his gear and prepared to set off. Cher sent him on his way with a sharp command to go. But before he could take more than a step, she called out his name, her hand reaching out as if to stop him. He turned back, asking what was the matter. Her gaze was fixed on something nearby, her expression suddenly filled with concern. Following her line of sight, he saw the reason for her alarm. Sprawled amongst the rocks lay Jennifer, unconscious and bleeding. She is still breathing, but as Makio examines her, he confirms her leg is broken. With a sigh, he considers letting her stay another night to recover. He explains that he has already used recovery magic to heal her wounds, so her condition should be stable for now. Jennifer rests, her breathing slow and steady. He turns to Cher, stating that he doesn't want to delay their desert exploration any longer. Cher agrees, announcing with a smile that she will head out to the desert as they had planned. With their decision made, they depart, leaving the forest behind. Makio reassures himself that Jennifer will likely leave on her own once she awakens. They arrive in the vast, empty desert, pausing to take in the endless dunes under the harsh sun. Suddenly, the sand before them erupts as a monstrous creature with a toothed maw bursts forth. Cher cries out Makio's name in alarm. The creature reveals its full, colossal form, a giant sandworm that towers over them, its gaping, circular mouth lined with rows of sharp teeth. His expression hardens with resolve. He decides he must eliminate this threat to explore in peace. Placing his faith in the sword he inherited from PJ, he lunges forward, unleashing a devastating series of slashes. The blade glows with power, instantly dicing the massive creature into several pieces before it can even attack. He observes the result with satisfaction, noting the instant kill. Cher is left speechless, exclaiming how amazing it was. Makio muses that the sword is truly incredible, and now he understands why PJ considered it weak. Its true potential was far beyond its former owner's grasp. He consults the notebook again, noting its warning about poisonous plants, a detail he finds concerning. However, he also observes that desert monsters are generally considered weak, and given the complete lack of vegetation around them, he deems the information somewhat unreliable. Setting aside the cryptic notes, he resolves to press on. With Cher by his side, he declares that it's time to explore the vast, empty desert stretching before them. Their journey across the sun-scorched sands eventually leads them to a brief respite in the shade of a large, solitary rock. Suddenly, a dark shape moving across the sky catches their attention. Both look up, startled. Makio asks what it could be, while Cher wonders aloud if it's just a bird. It is not a bird. The object is revealed to be a massive island, floating impossibly in the sky, tethered to the earth by a colossal chain. His eyes widen with realization. He excitedly asks if this could be the ruins mentioned in PJ's notebook, and, without waiting for an answer, urges Cher to follow him. They approach the point where the chain meets the sand. Its sheer scale is breathtaking, each link a structure unto itself, dwarfing the two adventurers standing at its base. He reaches out and places a hand on the immense metal surface, marveling at its size. He admits he cannot even identify the material it is made from. He turns to Cher, his mind made up. He declares their new objective, to climb the chain and reach the floating island. She responds with a determined pump of her fist. But as they begin their ascent, the true difficulty of the task becomes apparent. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he realizes just how arduous this climb will be. He pants, admitting to himself that despite his training in the demon land, this climb is incredibly hard. Beside him, Cher lets out a cry of surprise, struggling against an unseen force. He recalls how Cher had tried to use magic to make the climb easier, only to be repelled. He had attempted the same and failed. His current method is to coat himself in magic, allowing him to stick to the chain, but he realizes this will quickly drain his energy and leave him helpless. The chain itself seems to be absorbing his magic. Pondering who could have created such a thing, he pushes the mysteries aside, knowing he has no choice but to continue the ascent. With their strategy set, the two begin their arduous journey up the colossal chain, dwarfed by its sheer scale against the empty desert landscape. Far above, their destination hangs in the sky, the chain disappearing into the rocky underside of the floating island. The climb takes its toll. Both are drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, pushing themselves onward with strained words of encouragement, believing they are almost there. With a final surge of effort, a hand grips the edge, pulling over the precipice. He collapses onto the grassy surface, utterly spent but triumphant. He has made it. Cher, equally exhausted, stumbles to her knees beside him. As they catch their breath, their eyes fall upon the sight before them. The ruins of a town, its ornate buildings choked by the immense roots of a colossal tree. Walking through the silent streets, he observes houses and furniture, clear evidence that a culture once thrived here. Yet it is all now just ruins. He scans the area, noting the complete absence of human bones or any signs of conflict. A quiet unease settles in as he reaches a conclusion. The entire island is uninhabited. He surveyed the empty town, wondering aloud if its inhabitants had simply vanished. The two of them walked through what appeared to be a graveyard, the weathered stones standing like silent sentinels. Cher's expression was somber as she took in the scene. His attention was then drawn to a single, large monument standing apart from the others. He recognized it immediately as a grave. Stepping closer, he read the clear inscription carved into the stone. Peter Jefferson rests here. The name struck him with the force of a physical blow. He turned to Cher in shock, exclaiming the initials, P.J. He recalled the book they had found with the skeleton, also marked P.J., and desperately questioned what this contradiction could mean. His mind flashed back to the robed skeleton they had discovered sitting in a chair deep within a cave. If P.J. was buried here, he wondered, then who was that? He looked to Cher for an answer, but she could only admit that she had no idea. As night fell and the moon rose, the mystery only deepened. With the sun gone, they decided it was best to camp for the night. The temperature plummeted due to the high altitude. Shivering from the cold, Makio spotted a vine-covered ruin and asked Cher if he could huddle with her for warmth. She responded with a gentle smile, opening her arms and pulling him into a close, warm embrace. Elsewhere, under the light of a full moon that illuminated the rooftops of a sprawling city, a desperate plea cut through the night, begging for a halt. It was met with a powerful, unyielding refusal. A lone bird circles in the sky above the vast, empty desert. Watching it fly, Makio points towards the horizon, indicating a direction. With no further discoveries to be made on the floating island in the sky, he and Cher decided it was time to return to the cave they had made their base. Inside, he brushes sand from his armor, complaining about being covered in it. Beside him, Cher slumps over, admitting her exhaustion. He sits down with a sigh, watching Cher eat. He considers the possibility of using magic to heat some water for a bath later. His contemplation is shattered as a sudden sound makes him whip his head around, his eyes wide with surprise. Before him, a woman stumbles forward, collapsing from exhaustion. He cries out in alarm. He stares in disbelief, shouting for Cher as he recognizes the newcomer. He is shocked that she is still here and notices a terrible wound on her arm. As he processes the shock, Cher is already at the woman's side, helping her. Makio asks again why she is still here, to which Cher simply replies with a questioning so. The injured woman answers his unspoken question, explaining that she cannot get out. She recounts how the moment she entered the forest, both monsters and plants attacked her, causing her to completely lose her sense of direction. Makio observes her dejected state, realizing she has been baptized by the demon land. She stood before Makio exhausted. He questioned her, asking if she, a cleric, couldn't use even basic healing magic. She quietly admitted that she had used too much of her magic power and was completely depleted. He lay down, pulling a blanket over himself, and curtly instructed her to do some work for a change. Since she had been eating their food without permission, she could at least keep the fire going. The cleric looked up, surprised by his demand. The next morning, he awoke with a long stretch, the sunlight filtering through the trees outside the cave. His gaze fell upon the cleric, who now had her hair tied back, sitting vigilantly by the hearth. He noted with some surprise that she had apparently managed to keep the fire going all night without sleeping. She looked down, her expression filled with shame. She confessed that since arriving in this demon land, she had been completely helpless, unable even to find her way back. In response, he offered her a crystal-tipped staff. He explained it was a paralysis staff, and that if she used it to immobilize the monsters, she should be able to make it to the stream at the forest's entrance. The cleric looked down at her hands, then up with tear-filled eyes, before her expression hardened into one of pure resolve. She felt her knees, her voice ringing with desperation. She begged him to allow her to stay for a while, promising emphatically that she would pay for her lodging. Her sudden, fervent plea left Makio completely stunned. She continued, her voice unwavering, declaring that she had realized her own weakness in this land. She was fully aware of her shortcomings, but knew that if she left without doing anything, nothing would ever change. Makio looks at her intently, questioning her previous talk of getting revenge on the comrades who banished her. He cuts to the heart of the matter, asking if she truly wants to change. She remains silent, her gaze lowered. She finally speaks, revealing her past. She was abandoned by her parents and taken in by the church, where sister encouraged her to live freely. It was this advice that led her to become an adventurer, only to be cast out once again. Her voice lowers as she confesses that the idea of revenge was merely an excuse she had invented. With a tear forming in her eye, she reveals the painful truth she has been avoiding, that no one needs her, a reality born from her own refusal to accept her weaknesses. He listens to her confession, his expression neutral as he processes her words. He then asks if she has a purpose for being in this harsh mystic realm. She looks towards him and share, stating that her purpose is them. Her demeanor shifts, a look of admiration on her face. She declares that she finds it amazing how they live so freely in such a dangerous place, without any need for validation from others. Her praise leaves him momentarily stunned. Following her declaration, she bows deeply, earnestly begging him to teach her the ways of an adventurer. He is taken completely by surprise, flustered as he insists that he isn't an adventurer at all. He clarifies that he only explores the desert out of a desire to understand the land he owns. He turns away, sweating slightly, and tells her that if she wants to explore, she should do it by herself. She lifts her head, her expression unreadable in response to his abrupt dismissal. Undeterred by his rejection, the cleric, Jennifer, declares she will proceed on her own. She then turns to a startled Cher, earnestly asking to be taught how to bake bread instead. He interjects, telling the two women to get along. Flustered, Jennifer calls out Makio's name as Cher looks on. Despite his brusque tone, Jennifer calmly informs Makio that she will allow him to stay for a while, doing as he pleases. She then asks if she might use an empty space for her bed, leaving him momentarily speechless. She then offers him a coin, explaining it is a small advance payment. Makio looks on in disbelief, realizing he has somehow gained another housemate and wondering where all went wrong. His confusion prompts him to ask what the coin is. Jennifer explains it was payment from the only opponent she ever defeated in the demon land, a female zombie, its mangled form flashing in her memory. He examines the object, recognizing it as an old gold coin of a type he has never seen before. Under the light of a full moon, the forested landscape is still, and so Jennifer came to stay with them, a development that left Makio feeling somewhat unsettled. Sometime later, Jennifer finds Makio working and asks what he is making. He explains that he is crafting a staff to trade at the training facility, dismissing it as poorly made and little more than a freebie. She takes the staff from him, surprised, and identifies it as a paralysis staff. Jennifer vehemently disagrees with his assessment, exclaiming that for a debuffer, it is an excellent and valuable weapon. Makio is stunned by her words. As Makio processes her praise, Cher smiles knowingly at him and asks if he thinks so, too. He looks away, scratching the back of his head, flustered but pleased. He and Cher watch as Jennifer waves a cheerful goodbye from the mouth of the cave, telling them to take care before she departs. Once she is gone, Cher turns to him, asking about the woman's departure. He explains that Jennifer isn't actually leaving their group. Startled, Cher grabs him, demanding to know why. He clarifies that Jennifer has decided to stay and have her own adventures. A bright smile spreads across her face as she realizes Jennifer's intentions are just like her own. He lets out a quiet sigh, a bead of sweat on his temple, as he reflects on how Jennifer has rather forcefully inserted herself into their lives. Sometime later, in town, a merchant informs him that the paralysis staff he crafted sold for a high price. The man adds that there have already been requests for more. The merchant then recalls that Makio had been searching for a magic book, though not one concerning time or space magic. Makio listens intently, confirming the merchant's memory. In response, he explains that he found a beginner's textbook on the subject. The book itself is old, bound in leather with an ornate pentagram embossed on the cover, and he flips through its aged pages. He clarifies that while the tome only contains basic magic effects and circles, it is still quite useful for understanding the fundamental systems of magic. That day, he decides to trade the book, also using his funds to acquire tools for shipbuilding and new clothing for the women. He and Cher walk through the town, waving to an acquaintance. Back at their camp, he settles in to study his new materials, chewing on a piece of straw as he absorbs the information. He continued his studies, turning his attention to the magic circles etched into PJ's weapons. He could roughly categorize them into fire, water, earth, and wind systems, but he sensed a deeper complexity he didn't yet grasp. For future reference, he meticulously copied the intricate designs onto paper, noting that most of the magic circles were still unidentifiable to him. As he sat engrossed in his work, Jennifer approached from behind. She questioned why he kept reading books instead of going out to defeat monsters. He replied without turning, explaining that if she wanted to defeat them, she should go on ahead. He reminded her that they were each on their own separate adventures. She considered his words for a moment, conceding that it was true. With that settled, she turned her gaze toward the mouth of the cave, preparing to depart on her own. Before leaving, however, she turned back one last time with a small smile, thanking him for getting clothes for her. He remained focused on his task, simply stating that it had been on the way, his back still turned to her. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the wilderness, a lone figure trudged through the rugged terrain. Clad in a hood and a face covering, they carried a large, heavy hammer, their purpose unknown. With a bright smile, Cher calls out to Makio, a splash of blood visible on her cheek. He reacts with surprise, asking what happened as he notices she is covered in blood. She casually dismisses his concern, explaining that the blood belongs to a haze turtle, not her. She then holds out a circular stone object, asking if he recognizes it. He takes the object for a closer look. It is a stone ring, clearly not a natural formation, marked with intricate lightning patterns along its surface. While consulting a book, he confirms that the ring is definitely man-made. However, he notes with some confusion that nothing happens when he attempts to infuse it with his magic. His eyes widen with a sudden realization as he looks from the book to the ring. He points out that the lightning patterns are identical to those depicted on ancient ruins in the text. He asks Cher where she found it, and she confirms it was in the swamp. Nearby, Jennifer Volkov lies collapsed on the ground, soaking wet and panting from exhaustion. Cher explains that she had been trying to teach Jennifer how to swim. Gazing out at the murky expanse of water, Makio theorizes that there might be ruins buried deep within the swamp. With newfound purpose, he declares that they will go and investigate. He strips off his upper clothing and begins to stretch, preparing for the dive. He announces that he has enchanted his arm with light magic, ready to proceed. He plunges into the dark water. His enchanted fist glows with a brilliant light, piercing the gloom as he swims deeper, surrounded by bubbles and curious fish. The light reveals the swamp's hidden ecosystem, teeming with strange, ancient-looking aquatic life, from armored fish to bizarre crustaceans. He plunged deeper into the murky water, only to be confronted by a monstrous, fanged fish lunging at him. With a grimace, he recognized the immediate danger. The creature was a nuisance he couldn't afford to waste time on. He decided to use magic, creating a powerful current to propel himself directly to the bottom. The magical force slammed into him, sending him hurtling toward the swamp bed. He reached the bottom, but the very current he'd summoned had churned the mud, completely obscuring his vision. Frustrated, he realized a new approach was needed. Believing the ruins lay buried, he began to systematically generate more currents, intending to excavate the entire area as the swamp floor rumbled in response. After some time, he broke the surface, gasping for breath, his companions watching from the bed. As he dried himself, Jennifer asked if his search was successful. He explained his attempt to excavate the bottom for potential ruins, but the water had become too murky to see. He resolved to dive again once the sediment settled. Just as he finished speaking, his gaze shifted sharply, catching a new presence nearby. A pair of sturdy boots had appeared at the edge of their camp. The boots belonged to a short, hooded figure carrying a massive hammer. She wore a mask over her lower face and called out to him by name. "Hey, Makio!" She stepped forward, splashing in the shallow water, and got straight to the point, asking Makio if he had any business on this land. Having heard people were here, she had come to see for herself. Makio, surprised by the sudden appearance, simply greeted her. Before he could say more, the slime companion lunged from his shoulder, enveloping the stranger's head in a surprise attack. The sudden assault startled everyone, including the hooded figure. The impact sent the stranger stumbling backward into the swamp with a great splash. Jennifer cried out in alarm, worried the person would drown and asking if they should help. Makio, however, remained calm, stating that it would be easier to help once they actually started drowning. He then waded in, pulling the sputtering figure from the water. As her hood fell back, it revealed not a man, but a young woman, soaked and gasping for air. His eyes widened in surprise at the discovery. The woman coughed violently, expelling the swamp water from her lungs. Still coughing, she managed to stammer out an apology. Makio, having unceremoniously slung her over his shoulder, began to carry her to shore. He admonished her, stating that if she dared to come to this land, she needed to be stronger. Being so easily beaten by slime was a sign of hopelessness. Once on dry land, he set her down. As Jennifer and Cher looked on, the woman explained her purpose for coming. She had heard that the wands produced on this island were of exceptionally high quality. Her expression grew intense as she pleaded with him to sell the wands to her. Makio listened and then calmly informed her that, at present, the wands were sold exclusively to military training facilities. He then elaborated on his position. He wasn't opposed to selling them, but he had no need for money. Instead, he asked if she possessed anything of value that she would be willing to trade. A look of nervous hope crossed her face. She gestured to her large backpack, inviting him to take a look inside and see if there was anything he would accept as a trade. He pulls a book from the woman's bag. She explains that it should contain the history of this very place. He begins to read as she kneels nearby, nervously commenting that the author's imagination is quite wild, with its tales of floating islands and monsters taller than mountains. He looks up, making an offer. He will trade one wand for 10 history books like this one. The woman is shocked by the proposal. He clarifies that for now, he will just take this single book and will prepare 10 wands for her next visit. She protests, flustered, that the deal is too disadvantageous for her, since she has no idea when she will be able to return. He thoughtfully considers her point. He then presents a condition. If she cannot accept, the deal is off, but she must keep what she has seen here a secret. After a moment of hesitation, she agrees. With the terms agreed upon, he turns and gently pushes a small, horned girl forward. The warrior's eyes widen in utter shock at the sight of her. He sternly warns the warrior not to speak a word about what she sees on this land. The horned girl, Cher, glares defiantly, asking if the woman wants a fight. The warrior recoils, stammering in terror that Cher is from the demon tribe. The warrior falls silent, sweat dripping down her face as her gaze shifts toward the dark maw of a nearby cave. He ignores her fear and instructs Cher to choose the right magic stones and craft the wands. He then tells Jennifer to check if the warrior has anything else they can trade for. The warrior meekly acknowledges her understanding. As Cher and Jennifer sit down to begin their work, he turns back to the warrior with a final, direct question. Why does she need the wands? He listens as the warrior explains her urgent need. She reveals that bandits have revolted to the west, and she requires powerful weapons to suppress them. He notes the potential profit from such internal conflict and asks if she is a merchant. Flustered, she confirms. As he considers this, Cher quietly pulls him aside for a word. She expresses her suspicion, noting that the warrior's items are of too high a quality to be obtained by ordinary means. Cher suggests that one would only find such things by attacking a noble's carriage, implying the warrior might be a thief. He considers the possibility, wondering if a high-ranking adventurer could have turned to thievery. He feels a sense of familiarity, as if he's seen the warrior somewhere before. Despite the suspicion, he resolves to trade with her regardless. Her sharp ears catch their hushed conversation. Whirling around, she vehemently denies the accusation, shouting that she is not a thief. Unfazed by her outburst, he presses the issue. If she is not a thief, he demands to know where she acquired her items. The warrior looks away, sweating under the pressure of his gaze. She finally relents, introducing herself as a noble from East Kenya, sent by her uncle, the Lord, to purchase weapons. As she speaks, Cher recalls where she's seen her before and explains to Makio that while most people think this land is part of East Kenya's territory, it is not. He processes the new information. A rebellion has broken out in her territory, and the noble's daughter has been sent to buy weapons. He points at her, insisting that she should flee, not fight, as the citizens of East Kenya have no other escape route. The warrior grits her teeth in frustration. Cher elaborates on the reputation of the warrior's homeland. She explains that East Kenya, being close to the land of the elves, is known for the bravery and recklessness of its people. In other words, they are considered savages. The warrior rejects the notion of fleeing, proudly declaring that she is the best female warrior in all of East Kenya. Hearing this, Makio's expression softens. He muses that if her items aren't stolen, he can rest easy. He then speculates that perhaps her uncle didn't send her to buy weapons at all, but rather sent her away under that guise to get her to safety. With their business concluded, the warrior, now hooded and masked, prepares to depart. As she leaves, Makio gives her a final, quiet instruction, not to mention anything about their transaction. After the recent trade, the investigation of the swamp resumed, leading to the discovery of the bones of a giant creature. The small, hooded figure departed from the waterside, laden with reeds and their large hammer. During that search, Makio had explored the underwater ruins himself, swimming past the gargantuan skull. But on that particular day, nothing of significance was found among the remains. Now, sometime later, he sits engrossed in a book as Cher and a masked warrior approach. The warrior asks if he is returning to the swamp, but he replies that today, he intends to read. His attention is fixed on the text, which tells a grim story. It speaks of a time when the surrounding land was a country, before its people suddenly began to disappear in large numbers without a trace. The book describes a vast and desolate territory, a rugged and unforgiving landscape. Within this ancient land, strange beliefs and stranger creatures existed. There was a religion that revered deer as messengers of a god, and tales of floating islands that were, in fact, colossal beasts. As he reads on, he learns that the territory was also plagued by constant natural disasters. A realization dawns on him. The cave he discovered might have once served as a shelter for the land's inhabitants. His thoughts then turn to a more immediate concern, his focus shifting to a different section of the book. It describes East Kenya, the homeland of the warrior he recently met, as a fertile land, but one frequently ravaged by rebellions and wars. He recalls her words about adventurers causing an internal conflict, a statement that seems to clash with the book's depiction of them as heroes who reclaim their territory. The discrepancy leaves him with a sense of foreboding, a feeling that mirrors the darkening sky. It seems another storm is on the horizon. At a remote outpost, a man's voice dismisses a concern, stating that as is evident from the lack of activity, they have not mobilized. The man, a merchant, explains that while he has heard of the adventurers' rebellion, their location is too remote to be involved. The young man, Makio, counters that a female warrior from the nobility had visited the day before, warning of a rebellion in a nearby territory. Seated at a table with Makio and his companions, the merchant reassures them, suggesting the rebellion has likely already been suppressed and is not something they need to worry about. His concerns eased, Makio begins to walk away with his party, thinking to himself that perhaps he was worrying too much. Beside him, the horned girl pops her head out from her hood. She looks up at the sky and calls out to Makio, pointing out that it has begun to rain. The sky opens up, and a sudden, torrential downpour lashes the mountainous landscape. The group scrambles for shelter under a rocky overhang. The female warrior curses the terrible rain. Makio calls to her, and she responds that they need to move the sandbags to the back of the cave. She adds that while the cave is safe for now, the fields will be in trouble if the rain continues like this. He agrees with her assessment. The female warrior then declares that she will go and check on the situation herself. Outside their shelter, the crops in the field are being relentlessly battered by the heavy, driving rain. Standing in the deluge, she observes the rapidly rising water level. Realizing it is going to flood, she resolves to intervene, preparing to use magic to make the water flow into the ground. She channeled her power, raising a massive wall of earth to divert the surging water. The ground groaned under the strain as the makeshift dam held back the flood, with Makio watching from safe distance. Returning to the others, she reported the outcome. It was not a complete success. Although she had protected their fields, the surrounding area was now completely flooded. This, she lamented, would make it difficult to expand their farmland. This realization settled heavily upon them. For the foreseeable future, they would be dependent on trade for essential supplies like vegetables and wheat. The rain did not relent, continuing to pour down heavily and intensifying the next day into what the horned woman called a hurricane. Trapped inside, Makio turned his attention to PJ's journal, suggesting they use the time to craft homemade traps based on the magic circles within. He set to work, explaining his plan to carve an explosion trap's magic circle onto a wooden board. To control the detonation, he would deliberately leave the carving incomplete by omitting a single line, preventing it from activating instantly. The trap, he mused, would be potent. If hidden correctly under a pile of dead leaves, the resulting blast should be powerful enough to blow off the leg of a large monster. Suddenly, a deafening boom shook the shelter, startling him from his work. He wondered aloud if it was an explosion, just as the others urgently called for him to come outside. He rushed to join them in the deluge, their attention fixed on a massive, dark shape looming in the distance. The horned woman voiced their shared confusion, asking if a mountain had always been there, before a horrifying realization dawned on her. The mountain was moving. Makio could only stare, his eyes wide with disbelief. It was no mountain. It was a colossal creature, a living behemoth covered in shaggy, dark fur, heaving itself forward on immense, pillar-like legs through the pouring rain. The sheer force of its passage was devastating. With a great whoosh of displaced air, ancient trees were snapped like twigs, their trunks splintering with sharp cracks against the storm's roar. The colossal beast was a living mountain, its very presence generating thunderstorms and gathering powerful winds around its immense form. The maelstrom it created was not without victims. Giant turtles watched in alarm as wyverns, caught in the tempest, were struck down by bolts of lightning. Watching the chaos unfold, Makio's eyes widened in sudden recognition. He realized this was the giant magical beast mentioned in PJ's notebook, a creature that was said to appear only once every 3 months. He couldn't comprehend where something so massive could have been hiding until now, his mind reeling from the sheer scale of the destruction it was causing. His thoughts were cut short as the violent winds hurled a massive bear through the air, its body thudding to the ground right before them. The group braced for impact as the ground shook. The bear was not the only creature caught in the storm's fury. All around, other monsters were being lifted into the tornado-like winds, only to be killed instantly by lightning strikes. Amidst the carnage, Makio assessed their dire situation. Part of their cave shelter had already collapsed, and he realized that staying inside meant risking being buried alive. He noticed the surviving monsters were all fleeing in one direction, to the north. He made a swift decision, reaching out to his companions. He declared that they would follow the other creatures and flee to the north as well. Their decision was spurred on by the terrifying source of the storm, which continued to generate hurricane-force winds that tore through the landscape. With no time to waste, Makio began issuing orders for their escape. He instructed Jennifer to tie herself to him with a rope so she wouldn't fall off his back, and told Cher to cast magic on her own legs. He stressed that they needed to get away with all their might. He charges forward, carrying Jennifer Volkov on his back, while Cher runs alongside them. Debris and splintered trees fly through the air as they make their desperate escape from the storm's epicenter. Their flight takes them through the rain-lashed forest, past other creatures, like a giant spider, also fleeing in terror from the cataclysm. As they navigate the treacherous terrain, he shouts instructions over the roar of the storm, telling them to keep heading north. Following his lead, they finally break through the tree line, arriving at a vast, barren wasteland where lightning cracks across the sky, illuminating jagged rock formations. The three of them pause, soaked and exhausted. Cher pants for breath, her face etched with fatigue, while Makio stares ahead, his expression grim. They are not alone in their flight. A mass exodus of monstrous creatures, wyverns, elephantine beasts, and imps, scrambles across the landscape, all desperate to escape the storm's wrath. He watches the chaotic scene, sweat beading on his temple, and murmurs that it looks like the end of the world. Jennifer realizes the open wasteland offers no protection and tells him they should go back to the forest for now. He agrees, acknowledging their urgent need to find a place to hide. But as they turn, the ground beneath them cracks and gives way. With cries of shock, the group slides and crashes down into a dark chasm that opened beneath their feet. They land hard inside a structure of stone bricks. Jennifer, seemingly unharmed, immediately tends to Makio, who clutches his head, groaning in pain from the impact. He looks around the dark, cylindrical chamber they've landed in, a single shaft of light piercing the gloom from high above. As Jennifer kneels beside him, she wonders aloud if they've fallen into an old well or perhaps the ruins of a settlement from the demonic realm. He can only grimace, sweat beading on his brow from the intense pain. The source of his agony becomes clear as he looks down at his leg, twisted at an unnatural angle. He realizes with a jolt of panic that it's broken. His companions react to his state. Jennifer calls out his name, Makio, in concern. He manages to confirm that he's alive, prompting her to observe that at least they now have shelter from the wind and rain. Cher, meanwhile, looks on with a faint smile. Sometime later, a fire crackles in the center of their makeshift camp. As thunder rumbles from the world above, Cher returns with an armful of firewood and uses an ability she calls Thunderclap to instantly ignite the kindling, adding it to the growing blaze. Despite the relative safety of their shelter, Makio remains tense, listening intently. He realizes with dread that even deep underground, he can still hear the thunderous footsteps of the colossal beast they fled. He warns the others that they are not safe yet. Hearing this, Jennifer looks down, apologizing for being a burden and admitting that she thought she was going to die. The combination of his injury, the lingering fear, and his exhaustion finally overwhelm him. As Jennifer calls his name again, his head lolls back and he loses consciousness. Time passes in a blur of unconsciousness. Later, a gentle poke to his head attempts to rouse him. A voice urges him to wake up as a single drop of water falls from the ceiling and splashes onto the stone floor. His eyes snap open with a start. Jennifer is leaning over him, her expression urgent as she repeats her plea for him to wake up. He stares back, disoriented and alarmed. He awoke with a start, asking how long he had been unconscious. His attention quickly shifted to his foot, which he found to be completely healed. Jennifer calmly explained that she had used healing magic to mend his injury. Just then, Cher's voice echoed from a dark opening in the cavern wall, beckoning them to follow. With Makio now able to walk, he and Jennifer hurried after her. He held a torch aloft, illuminating the narrow stone corridor as he called out, asking what the matter was. He stepped further into the strange passageway, wondering what kind of structure it was and if it might be connected to an underground water vein. The narrow corridor opened into a breathtaking sight, a vast, dark cavern, its ceiling and walls dotted with countless points of soft, ethereal light. Makio identified the lights as some kind of glowing mushroom, cautioning Cher not to touch them without care. She, however, was simply mesmerized, remarking on how beautiful the spectacle was. Their exploration led them to the shore of a vast underground lake. The darkness across the water was too deep to see through clearly. Suddenly, Cher called out to Makio, urging him to look at an object she had found. It was a circular stone disc, intricately carved with a geometric pattern. He took the disc, his eyes widening in recognition as he identified it as a thunderstone. Jennifer, intrigued, asked Cher where she had discovered it, and Cher explained that a skeleton had been holding it. Nearby, in a small alcove surrounded by the stubs of long-extinguished candles, sat the rogued skeleton, its bony fingers still curled in the posture of clutching the stone for eternity. While Makio wonders aloud if the skeletal remains are a mummy, Cher dismisses the thought, instead suggesting they search for anything else of value on the body. Their search yields a small, ornate book. As Jennifer joins them to look, Cher observes its old design and identifies it as a beginner's adventurer's guidebook. Opening the book reveals a drawing of the very stone they just found. A handwritten note confirms its purpose, stating, "Don't lose the dungeon key." The mention of a dungeon prompts a conversation. Jennifer reveals she has experience, having been part of a famous party that explored the capital city's dungeon. In contrast, both Makio and Cher admit they have never been in one. As they continue to inspect the guidebook, another, more cryptic phrase written on the page catches their attention. If the dungeon is stolen by A. The bizarre implication of the unfinished sentence leaves them stunned. Makio voices their shared disbelief, questioning how it's even possible for a dungeon to be stolen. Noting that the presence of the giant magical beast seems to have vanished, Makio decides it's time to leave. Cher agrees, still muttering about the impossibility of the idea, as the three of them turn toward the cavern's exit. In a forest clearing, an old stone well stands silent, its structure gripped and overgrown by thick, gnarled tree roots. With a grunt of effort, Makio braces himself against the ground and grips the edge of the well's heavy stone cover, beginning to pull it aside. He successfully slides the cover open, observing with relief that the weather has cleared and the giant magical beast seems to have left. From within the dark opening, Cher and Jennifer begin to climb out. The surrounding forest is a scene of utter devastation. Massive trees are snapped and uprooted, their trunks lying scattered across the scarred landscape. Surveying the destruction, Makio notes internally that the beast left the forest in a terrible state. Despite the grim sight, he turns to his companions and suggests they head for home. He can't help but wonder if the very terrain has been altered by the creature's rampage, imagining the chaos it must have inflicted upon the local wildlife. His train of thought is abruptly broken by a loud growl from his stomach. He realizes with a sweat drop that he hasn't eaten anything since the previous day. Hearing the noise, Cher and Jennifer turn toward him, their own hunger evident. He suggests they eat some camu seeds to endure the hunger for now. His attention then shifts to a pile of shattered stone, the remains of their golem. PJ Jennifer lets out a sound of dismay at the sight. Looking past the golem's remains, he sees that the entrance to their cave home is choked with rubble from a collapse. He can only mutter a quiet, Oops. Jennifer confirms his observation, stating that the room is filled with stones and rubble, making their stored wheat unusable. She resolves that they must clean the place up and make it habitable. As she speaks, however, Makio is suddenly struck by an overwhelming wave of exhaustion. He collapsed onto the ground, utterly spent. Under the light of the full moon, they had finally managed to clear enough space for 3 adults to sleep. His companions were in a similar state. Jennifer apologized, admitting she was also at her limit, while Cher had already succumbed to exhaustion, snoring loudly beside them. He sat up, wrapped in a thin blanket, sighing in frustration. Though he felt too drowsy to move, he desperately wished he could take a bath. As he sat there, a sudden sensation caught his attention. Something was moving in his pocket. Reaching inside, he pulled out a gold coin that was pulsing with a faint energy. He recognized it immediately. The gold coin he'd gotten from Jennifer, the one a mummy had possessed. It was throbbing in his palm like a living heart. Startled by the sensation, his fingers went slack, and the coin slipped from his grasp. The precious coin hit the dirt and, to his alarm, began rolling away on its own. He cried out and lunged for it, but tripped and fell hard on the uneven ground. He scrambled up and desperately threw a small rock, hoping to stop its momentum, but his aim was off. The rock clanked uselessly against the ground as the coin continued on its path. With no other choice, he gave chase, running through the dark forest after the glowing, rolling coin, wondering just how far it intended to lead him. He came to an abrupt halt, his eyes widening with a dawning horror. He recognized the terrain ahead. The coin was leading him straight toward the swamp. Before he could reach it, the coin skipped once across the murky surface of the water and then sank into the depths. He could only watch, clenching his fist in frustration. He stares in disbelief at the ripples spreading across the swamp's surface where the coin vanished. Refusing to accept the loss, he frantically searches the murky water's edge, splashing about until he finally retrieves the coin. As he holds it, a figure begins to rise from the water before him. It is a translucent, ethereal woman with the pointed ears of an elf, her form glowing softly under the full moon as dark, serpentine patterns adorn her limbs. The sight freezes him in place, his eyes wide with terror and his mouth agape. The spectral elf's gaze, however, drifts past him, her attention fixed on something in the distance as she murmurs, "Over there." Without another glance in his direction, she glides away, her feet passing over the water's surface without a sound as she disappears into the forest. He is left alone again, trembling, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fear. The next day, back at their camp, he recounts the tale to his companions. Sitting with Jennifer and Cher, he explains that he saw a translucent elf ghost over by the swamp. His story is met with an unexpected reaction from Cher, who bursts into laughter. She teases him about seeing a ghost, asking if it was scary. Jennifer, however, looks on with a serious, contemplative expression. He protests, insisting she shouldn't laugh because it was genuinely frightening, especially since the entity had no physical body. Jennifer, ignoring the banter, asks a pointed question. Did he do something to make the spirit resent him? He can only reply that he doesn't think so. She reassures Makio, explaining that even if the spirit resents him, a splash of holy water should calm it down. Makio expresses his surprise that she can create such a thing, to which Cher matter-of-factly adds that it's possible because Jennifer is a priestess. With that established, she closes her eyes and begins the ritual, chanting an incantation over the glass bottle as mystical runes swirl around. As her incantation continues, a faint aura surrounds her, and she lifts slightly from the ground. The process concludes, and she announces that it is done. Makio watches, impressed, thinking to himself that her refined chanting and gestures are those of a true priestess. He takes the newly consecrated water, a grin spreading across his face as he declares his intention to purify the gold coin within. That day, the group had set out to restore the cave that served as their base. The work was arduous and divided amongst them. Jennifer handled the washing, Cher cleared away debris, and Makio took on the heavy lift. After their labor, Jennifer calls out to him as he stands silhouetted at the mouth of the cave. He turns with a grim report. Most of their food supply has been destroyed. His gaze then falls upon a nearby object. He observes the set of armor belonging to the skeleton they called PJ, remarking with surprise that it doesn't have a single scratch on it. He brings this discovery to the others, asking what it could be. Cher speculates that it might be made of adamantite, an incredibly hard metal. Jennifer adds a cautionary note, explaining that armor of such high performance is so valuable that it has been known to cause comrades to fight amongst themselves for it. She turned to Makio, voicing an observation about the skeleton, PJ. It seemed to her that he was a lone wolf, someone who operated without any companions. Makio listened, his arms crossed as he considered her words. His attention then shifted to a large, intricate magic circle etched into the cave floor, its edges crumbled and broken in places. He realized with a growing unease that even though the base had collapsed for what looked like an attack by a giant magical beast, the circle was pulsing with energy, seemingly on the verge of activation. Faced with this imminent threat, he turned to Jennifer and Cher under the light of the full moon, declaring the room too dangerous to use for the time being. Later, while observing the gold coin they used to detect the ghost, he watched in alarm as it began to move again inside its jar. He realized with a start that Jennifer's holy water was having no effect at all. He cursed under his breath, recognizing that the elf spirit was being summoned once more. The thought of dealing with this troublesome ritual every single night filled him with frustration. Resolved to end it, he grabbed the jar and a stone, declaring he had no choice but to stop it. He ran from the cave, venturing even further into the swamp than he had the night before. He pressed on through the dark, quiet woods, the distance growing ever greater. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind as he wondered if he had traveled too far to return safely. Suddenly, his foot landed awkwardly on the leaf-strewn forest floor, and a sharp grunt escaped his lips. He looked down, his eyes widening in shock at what he saw. He felt something give way beneath his boot, followed by a muffled voice from under the dried leaves. To confirm what he'd heard, he deliberately stomped on the spot again. The sound confirmed his suspicion. Crouching down, he began to clear away the foliage, his expression cautious as he realized someone was truly buried there. Beneath the leaves lay a woman with pointed ears and short, light-colored hair. She was unconscious, with dark, serpentine markings visible on her arms. He recognized her instantly as the elf from the nightly summoning, but quickly understood she was no ghost. As he wondered if she could be undead, her eyes opened. She weakly confirmed she was alive and pleaded for help. Setting aside his shock, he helped her sit up and offered a flask of water. He noted that the gold coin inside the flask, a tool for detecting spirits, remained perfectly still. She accepted the water without hesitation, drinking deeply and quickly. Once she had quenched her thirst, she rose to her feet. He was struck by her impressive height. She turned to him and offered a simple apology. He immediately began to question her, asking where she had come from. She explained that her home was the country of the elves, located beyond the mountains. Her answer surprised him, as it meant she had crossed the treacherous snowy mountains. He asked for her name, and she introduced herself as Helgen Talone, though she preferred to be called Heli. In turn, he introduced himself as Makio, the landlord of the magical realm. Seeing how exhausted she was, he invited her to stay at his house for the time being. Heli explained she had been swallowed by the ground and couldn't move, gratefully accepting his offer. He now understood that the apparition from the previous night was Helgen's spiritual projection. Relieved that she had a physical form, he was no longer afraid. She explained that she had used her spirit to search for other living beings, but had found no one. She expressed her gratitude that the landlord had found her. Seeing her state, he asked if she was able to stand. He moved to support her, placing his arm around her as they began to walk. As he did, he noticed a fresh, bleeding wound on her shoulder and asked if she was injured. The injury was not a simple cut, but a dark, intricate symbol carved into her flesh. He examined it more closely, recognizing that it had been cut with a knife. A dreadful suspicion began to form in his mind. His suspicion was confirmed. He identified the mark as a slave's magic circle. He turned to her and asked bluntly if she was an escaped slave. She vehemently denied it, insisting she had never been anyone's slave, nor had she committed any crimes. With tears in her eyes, she explained that she had escaped to avoid being convicted of a crime that would have enslaved her. Her only crime was trying to stop her people from starting a foolish war. He processed her story, arms crossed, and pointed out that what she described sounded like treason. She shouted in protest, insisting that she had simply fled her country. Her defiance gave way to desperation. She knelt before him, promising she had no intention of causing trouble, and pleaded to be allowed to stay, just for a little while. As night settled over the forest, he responded not with judgment, but with a simple, practical question. Could she pay the rent? He listened as the elf woman formally introduced herself as Helgon, offering a polite, "Nice to meet you." His immediate, private assessment was that she seemed rather bossy. His companions, however, were less reserved in their reactions. Jennifer Volkov wondered aloud why troublemakers always seemed to gather in the demon world. Cher, with a scowl, identified Helgon as a demon, while Makio, overwhelmed, simply lamented that she was an outcast. Looking back on that moment under the cold, starry sky, he would later reflect on his naivete. At the time, he hadn't even considered the possibility, never imagining that this single elf would bring so much trouble. A simple meal is laid out on a large leaf, a portion of flatbread, some roasted tubers, and a side of shredded vegetation. As they eat, the horned woman, Cher, observes that they are out of wheat. The protagonist, Makio, looks at his portion with disappointment, remarking on how plain the meal is. He considers their situation dire, wondering aloud if the giant monster washed away all their supplies. The cleric, Jennifer, suggests that they might have to go to the training ground to trade for more. He asks what they should bring. Jennifer explains that nearly all their food and weapons are ruined, but suggests that wands might be the easiest items to craft. She adds that they could also use monster furs and potion ingredients. Her mention of potions gives Makio an idea. He turns to Jennifer, asking if she has ever studied pharmacology. She admits she only knows a little about things that can be sold at the market. Cher, however, interjects with a specific suggestion: elf potions. Her unexpected contribution hangs in the air, drawing a silent, thoughtful gaze from Jennifer. Makio, seizing the opportunity, asks Helgon if she can make healing potions. The elf woman smiles faintly, letting out a soft, knowing laugh. She confidently declares it's no big deal, offering to make them as compensation for her rent. With a cheerful laugh, she announces they should go gather ingredients right away. A surprised Makio can only manage a simple, "oh," before warning her to be careful. As a distant cry echoes, Makio watches her leave with a deadpan expression, flanked by the two women who continue to eat. He mutters to himself that this is just as he expected. Moments later, Helgon is sent flying backward, stunned by an unseen attack. Watching the scene unfold, Makio sighs, remarking on how troublesome she is. He turns to Cher, instructing her to accompany him into the forest to gather magic stones for their wands. She readily agrees, and they set off. Meanwhile, back at their base, a downcast Helgon is given her task by Jennifer to make potions from the materials they've collected. Jennifer states she will gather edible plants nearby. Both agree to their duties. As they walk through the woods, he notes that the presence of the giant monster seems to have scared away smaller creatures, reducing their number of encounters. Cher suggests they should therefore focus on quantity over quality, gathering as many magic stones as possible instead of searching for rare ones. Their work continues until dusk, and night falls upon the forest. By the time they return, the group has amassed a significant haul: a pile of magic stones, a large bundle of silk, and an assortment of monster claws and fangs. Jennifer expresses her amazement at the sheer quantity of materials. Cher, holding the bundle, identifies it as valuable arachne silk, remarking that it will be excellent for trading. Helgon presents the healing potions she has finished crafting. She requests more time with the medicinal herbs to properly assess their quality. Standing beside Cher, the protagonist agrees, pleased with their successful foraging. He then sets a clear rule for the newcomers. They are welcome to stay as long as they contribute their share, but failure to pay their rent will result in immediate eviction. He announces that he and Cher are departing for the training facility, leaving the others in charge of the cave. Helgon and Jennifer wave them off, wishing them a safe journey. As he walks, his thoughts turn to their growing community's needs. He realizes they must ask for more varied goods this time, including flour, vegetables, and even construction tools to accommodate their increased numbers. He and Cher walk towards the training facility when distant shouts cut through the air. He stops, a sense of unease washing over him. Something feels wrong. The source of the commotion is a chaotic scene within a fortified yard. A group of armored soldiers surrounds a single, unarmed woman, their screams echoing as they violently subdue her. He watches the brutal display, wondering if it's some form of combat training. He quickly dismisses the thought, realizing the opponent is a woman, not a child, as the soldiers cheer on the spectacle. He calls out, asking about the disturbance. A man in armor with a lion crest turns to greet him, recognizing him immediately. The protagonist addresses him as Captain. The captain casually explains that they are merely in the process of calming down the slaves. The captain asks if he is there to discuss the war. The protagonist clarifies that he is not. A disaster in the demon land has destroyed their food supply, and he has come to trade. Hearing this, the captain readily agrees. Seated at a table, they begin their negotiation. The protagonist offers arachne silk, which the captain recognizes as a rare and valuable item. In exchange, the captain offers food, saws, hammers, and needles. The protagonist confirms that the terms are perfect. His expression turns serious. The captain states that, before they conclude, there is something important he must share about the demon land. The protagonist listens, his attention fully captured by the captain's sudden shift in tone. The captain begins by asking if he remembers the civil war in East Kenya. The protagonist confirms that he does. The captain then adds that a noblewoman warrior also visited the demon land to purchase wands. He points to a map, indicating their current location in relation to the demon land and East Kenya. He reveals a critical piece of intelligence. The country of the elves has intervened in the civil war between the nobles and adventurers. He continues his explanation, stating that the elves claim they are reclaiming their ancestral land. The protagonist listens intently, the news of an elven invasion of East Kenya sinking in. He recalls Heli's desire to stop the war in her own country, realizing the situation is far more complex than he imagined. The captain elaborates on the conflict, explaining that the elves were driven back quickly. However, he points out that the people currently inhabiting the disputed territory are different from those who lived there before, which is the root of the problem. He goes on to describe the fallout from the battle against the elves. The adventurers gained significant military merit, while many nobles lost their status and influence as a result. He notes that in such a combative land, the strong easily sway public opinion. The protagonist is taken aback, sweating as he questions if such a power shift is truly possible. He then asks if this means the adventurers are now ruling the territory. The captain clarifies that it's not so simple. The nobles who instigated the adventurers are the ones currently in control, though he admits his own information might not be complete. He then delivers a stark warning. Those very nobles have begun to claim the demon land as their own territory. The captain suspects they are aware of the power of the protagonist's wand and intend to seize it for themselves. In response, the protagonist reveals that he, too, has purchased territory in the demon land. He rustles through his belongings and presents a formal document as proof. The captain recognizes the document as one issued by a real estate agent. He then delivers a blow, explaining that without the signature of the Estonian royal family, the deed holds little legal effect and would likely be dismissed in court. The protagonist is visibly jolted by this revelation. He stares in stunned disbelief, unable to process the news. The captain continues, explaining that the demon land has long been considered a gray area, a status quo that benefits neighboring countries. Despite the document's weakness, he concludes that it is better for everyone if the land remains in the protagonist's possession. He confirmed the young man's suspicion, affirming that, in a way, he was indeed on his side. This alliance, however, came with a condition. He explained that while they are the royal army, East Kenya is still part of the Estonian kingdom. The army could only intervene if East Kenya were to rebel against the royal family. With the political complexities laid bare, he issued a stern warning. Someone was actively targeting the demon land. The young man processed this, realizing that the army clearly had its own internal struggles to contend with. Despite the gravity of the warning, he smiled with confidence. He confirmed his understanding and asked a simple question. If someone were to come, was it acceptable to simply chase them away? The captain's expression grew serious again, acknowledging that the issue could become complicated. To that end, he promised to contact the central office and have official documents sent to prove the young man's ownership of the land. As their conversation concluded, they turned to leave. Behind them, soldiers roughly subdued a young, dark-haired woman, forcing her to the ground. The captain's attention then shifted to the captive. He addressed Makio, offering the woman as a thank-you gift for their continued trade. He suggested taking the slave to the demon land. He elaborated on her origins, revealing she had been sent by the new lord of East Kenya. With a dismissive tone, he added that Makio was free to treat her however he wished. The young man hesitated, worried that accepting a woman sent by the lord of East Kenya, possibly a former noble, would invite unnecessary trouble. The captain leaned in, confiding that having a woman in their facility was always problematic. However, he dismissed the concern, stating that she was no longer a noble but merely a slave. As long as she remained in the demon land, he assured, everything would be fine. As her fate was decided by the man, the young woman's eyes widened in sheer terror, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. The young woman stared at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She stammered his name, Mama Makio, suddenly remembering him as the one who had come to buy wands. He simply observed that she had changed her hairstyle a bit. Just then, another figure emerged, cloaked and hooded. It was Cher calling out his name. She urgently explained that the demon territory was in ruins and that they needed all the help they could find. The slave girl's eyes widened as she began to understand who this disguised person was. Understanding the gravity of the situation, he declared that they would take the demon with them. Without another word, he hoisted the stunned slave girl into his arms and sprinted away, shouting a quick "see you later" over his shoulder. Meanwhile, at the mouth of a dark cave, Helgon and an unhooded Cher stood waiting. As figures approached, Cher offered a simple welcome back. He reached the cave entrance, the slave girl still held in his arms. Cher immediately pointed to the newcomer, asking who she was. He calmly replied that she was a slave he had brought back. His gaze was steady and resolute as he made the statement. The declaration was met with confusion from Helgon, but for the slave girl, who looked past his shoulder, it was a moment of pure shock. Her wide-eyed stare fixed upon Helgon, and a single, horrified thought formed in her mind. An elf. In a sudden explosion of rage, she launched herself from his back, hurtling towards the elf. "You damn elves," she shrieked, her voice filled with anguish. "Because of you." She crashed into Helgon, tackling her to the ground and pinning her beneath her. The elf cried out in surprise, while the protagonist looked on, his expression hardening. As the new girl continues her furious assault, the protagonist intervenes, pushing her face away from the pinned-down elf. He holds them both, demanding they try to get along as fellow slaves. His words give the girl pause, her eyes wide with shock, while the elf glares up from the ground with simmering rage. She twists away, shouting that she is not a slave. Caught between the two hostile women, the protagonist plugs his ears, annoyed by the noise. He turns to her with a serious expression, laying down the terms of her new life. She will be living with them, and to stay, she must either fight or pay rent. If she fails to do either, she will be kicked out. With the immediate conflict paused, he announces to Cher that they should go build a house. Behind him, the elf and the new girl continue to glare at each other, growling silently. The next day, he emerges from a cave entrance, yawning a good morning to the others before his eyes land on an unexpected scene. He finds the elf and the new girl united, both vehemently demanding that Jennifer make the vegetable seasoning spicier. Jennifer seems overwhelmed by their shared intensity. He watches them, thinking to himself that it's good they seem to be getting along. With the group now somewhat cohesive, he outlines the plan for the day's hunt. Their goal is to gather food and materials. His declaration is met with a unified cheer, as four fists are raised in enthusiastic agreement. As they set out, he observes the new girl, Sylvia, noting that she seems more than capable of fighting on her own. His assessment is proven correct as he watches her leap into battle against a massive, axe-wielding orc. She cried out in alarm, finding herself caught in the massive jaws of a haze turtle. The creature had snatched her up, its eye regarding her impassively as it prepared to swallow her whole. In response to her cry, Cher immediately began to chant, calling out her companion's name. As she dashed forward, a powerful spell took hold, and electricity crackled violently across the creature's head. Seizing the opening Cher created, the protagonist leaped into the air, his weapon a silver arc. He brought it down with immense force, severing the turtle's long neck in a single, decisive slash. The massive head crashed to the ground, drenching him in a torrent of blood. He stood there for a moment, completely covered in the creature's blood, and apologized for the mess. He then instructed Cher to take Sylvia to the river to wash up and to find her some new clothes. Nearby, Helgon noted that she had also been splattered with blood and announced her intention to go wash as well. The protagonist simply acknowledged her statement. While the others were away, he began preparing a meal over a fire, simmering a large pot of Hayes turtle soup. After a taste confirmed it was delicious, his attention was suddenly broken by someone calling his name, Makio. It was Cher, rushing back from the river. She urgently beckoned for him to come with her for a moment, a serious look on her face. She led him to a grim discovery, the carcass of a horse, lying dead in a pool of its own blood. Helgon was already at the scene, calling out to Makio that she had found 2 more horse carcasses. She pointed out that one of them was saddled, indicating they had been ridden there by someone. A closer inspection of the area revealed further evidence of a struggle, a discarded bag, weapons lying on the ground, and more bloodstains. Reaching into the bag, he discovered a letter inside. He stared down at the letter, his mind racing. Makio, could it be an intruder? His thoughts were abruptly cut short by a startling sight nearby. A massive Vespa hornet nest hanging ominously above the carnage. He grimly noted that whoever rode the horse had been turned into meatballs by the swarm. The elf, Helgon, stated bluntly that the victims couldn't be saved and suggested they go back and eat. He turned to her, asking what she intended to do. She simply replied, "I see," her expression unreadable as she surveyed the scene. His attention remained on her. Addressing her as Helly, he pointed out that she was covered in tattoos. She explained that the markings were a seal for a curse she carried. Because of this affliction, she could hardly use any magic. With a sharp look, she corrected herself, admitting that, in fact, she couldn't use magic at all. He processed this, asking if it caused problems in her daily life. If not, he stated it was fine. As her landlord, he only cared that she continued making valuable potions. The horned woman, Cher, found the exchange interesting. Helgon seemed taken aback, asking if he wasn't afraid of her curse. Before he could respond, Sylvia interjected, claiming she was also cursed by the Demon King's lineage and couldn't use much magic. Cher dismissed her with a curt, "Not at all." As the group walked on, Sylvia elaborated that there were no rules for being in the demon land. She explained that she could only cast a spell that prevents pain or one that temporarily breaks her limits. The young man, Makio, lets out a soft sigh, a small puff of air visible in the cool air. His expression is calm, almost serene, as he gazes forward. He then glances down at a piece of paper in his hands, his fingers tightening slightly around the edge. A thought crosses his mind about how carefree others seem to be. With his decision made, he turns his back and walks away, leaving the paper resting on a stone as the wind begins to stir. The abandoned document, with its elegant script, is revealed to be an official decree, an order to leave the territory. A voice cuts through the quiet of the morning, insistent and clear. Helgon leans over Makio, her expression serious as she urges him awake. His eyes snap open, roused from sleep by her call. He sits up abruptly, startled by her sudden appearance beside his bedding. He exclaims that she gave him quite a fright. Once calmer, he questions her about a different matter, mentioning that Cher had taught her to use sap from the yassi tree for medicine jars. He points out that the material he'd been using melts with heat, and if there was a better alternative that hardened quickly, she should have told him. She acknowledges his point, but he interrupts, asking if she really came to his room so early just to discuss that. Helgon turns, revealing that her purpose is far more urgent. She and Cher saw something strange at the Western Creek. Her expression turns grim as she delivers the chilling news. It's a zombie. The group makes their way through the dense woods toward the creek. Upon arriving, Cher points toward the spot among the rocks. She confirms Makio has arrived and indicates that the creature is just over there. The creature is a horrifying sight, an emaciated corpse, its lower body missing, dragging itself forward with a guttural, inhuman groan. He watches it crawl, disgusted that it can move with just its upper body. He suggests that while it doesn't seem harmful, they should burn and bury it just in case. But as the zombie continues its slow crawl, Cher's voice cuts in sharply. Wait a minute. Chilling memories surfaced for Makio as he stared at the creature. He had defeated this very zombie once before, back in the demon land. The realization struck him. It hadn't been completely destroyed then, and it was still here. Shaking off the memory, he turned to Cher, urging her to burn the zombie with magic before its virus could spread. Helgon interjected, reminding him of the gold coin she had given him earlier, a coin she had taken from this very zombie. The detail seemed lost on him for a moment, but then he recalled the exchange. Her curiosity piqued. Helgon pressed him about the coin's significance. He explained that it was the same old gold coin the zombie possessed that had ultimately led him to her. Though he confessed he didn't fully understand the connection himself. She reacted with a burst of frustration, shouting that it was crucial information he should have shared with her immediately. As flames began to consume the undead creature, a thought occurred. The corpse was heavily decayed and its ears were missing, making identification nearly impossible. Still, the possibility arose that it could have been an elf adventurer. If it was an elf, it might have been her predecessor, one who had ventured into the vast and desolate demon land to explore its secrets. With this possibility in mind, Helgon examined the gold coin more closely, her expression thoughtful. She observed that the coin felt genuine, not a fake or imitation. She then asked him a critical question. Had the zombie found Midgard? When he asked if Midgard was the name of a city, she confirmed that it was. She elaborated, explaining that Midgard was the capital city of the magical kingdom of Yggdrasil. It was a legendary place, said to be more developed than any other nation due to its advanced magical tools and the fact that everyone, from children to the elderly, could wield magic. She concluded that Midgard had also traded with the elven country, but all records of the city had vanished long ago. Sylvia gasped in amazement, exclaiming that she had read about such a country in a history book. Hearing this, Makio made a connection. It must be the same history book he had received from Sylvia. He thought back to the history book Sylvia had given him. It was a collection of strange, disconnected accounts. A floating island devoured by a magical beast, a country that became the demon land, a religion that revered deer as divine messengers, in a time when people suddenly began to vanish. While that book held ancient mysteries, he directed the group's attention to a more immediate puzzle. He presented a different notebook, one belonging to PJ, explaining that while it mostly detailed ruins, the last page was critical. Helgon, Sylvia, and Cher listened intently. He recounted finding the notebook on the corpse of a man in a cave, a man who had been reduced to a mere skeleton. His final written words expressed a single regret, that he could not solve the mystery of the demon land. However, he continued, there was a twist. He and Cher had actually found that floating island, and there, they discovered the grave of Peter Jefferson. The implication of his words struck Helgon. She stared at him, processing the contradiction. If PJ died on the flying island, but the notebook was found with someone else, what could that possibly mean? He confirmed her suspicions, stating that he had reached the same conclusion. He urged her to look closely, comparing the handwriting on the last page with the script accompanying a magic circle elsewhere in the book. He then posed a leading question to Helgon, asking if she didn't think the handwriting on the last page looked significantly better than the rest. Her eyes widened as the realization dawned. In other words, she concluded, the notebook must have had two different authors. He agreed that it was highly possible. Taking a bite of fruit, he mused that it seemed neither of them had managed to solve the mystery of the demon land in the end. Helgon began to synthesize all the information. She recalled reading of the disasters and the god's messenger deer in her own elven country, connecting them to the history book. This led her to a grand theory. The magical kingdom of Yggdrasil must have existed in the demon land, including her elven predecessor, the zombie, that made 3 known investigators. As if to add another layer, Cher noted that among demons, deer are considered messengers of devils. Her mind raced with the implications of her theory. She wondered aloud where Midgard was located, and more importantly, why the great kingdom of Yggdrasil had vanished. She turned to face Makio, her expression resolute. She declared that, unfortunately, it seemed she could not leave this place until she had solved the mystery of the demon land. Nearby, Sylvia stammered that perhaps it was her destiny to solve the mystery, mentioning a history book that had been in her family for generations. Jennifer, however, gently quieted her, admitting that she too had grown curious about the land's secrets. Makio, meanwhile, sat on the ground and brought a more practical concern to the forefront. He reminded them that even if they discovered ruins, he was still the landlord, and he would not tolerate anyone attempting to hoard treasure. And so, with the great mystery of the demon land still unsolved, their everyday life in this new territory continued. The group settled into a routine of building their new home. Helgon and Cher collaborated, constructing a kiln from carefully laid bricks. Jennifer contributed by cleaning their living space and weaving sturdy baskets for their supplies. As for Sylvia, she had taken on a different kind of task, carrying a large monster bone over her shoulder. She turned to Makio, her expression earnest, and asked if it was possible for her to craft weapons and armor from the materials they gathered from monsters. He reacted with surprise, asking if she truly possessed such a skill. Sylvia admitted shyly that she wasn't ready just yet, but she wanted to try. He encourages Sylvia, telling her to go ahead since they have plenty of materials for her to craft with. He adds that she can make various things and even pay her rent that way. She proudly presents her work, a massive war hammer and a new set of practical, fur-lined gear. With a confident smile, she asks for his opinion. He can only stare in admiration, impressed by her craftsmanship. Having established herself as the Demon Land's armorer, Sylvia's ambition grows. She turns to Makio with a new, urgent request. For him to teach her how to fight. He hesitates, looking away with a troubled expression. He confesses that he doesn't believe he's strong enough to teach anyone, questioning whether his own survival skills are sufficient for the task. Unswayed by his reluctance, she bows her head and pleads earnestly, insisting she is ready for anything. Their conversation is cut short by a deafening roar as a massive wild bear charges from the tree line, its maw wide and fangs bare. In response, Sylvia leaps into action, bringing her heavy hammer down on the creature's skull. The blow connects with a dull thud, but fails to break through its thick hide, forcing her to realize her attacks are ineffective. He observes the fight from a safe distance, arms crossed. While he notes her fundamentals are sound, he sees a critical flaw in her approach and advises her to observe the beast's weak points more carefully. He elaborates on his instruction, telling her that when an attack proves useless, she must immediately switch tactics and improve her observation. He recalls his own fight with the beast, where he ultimately defeated it by targeting a vulnerability. Taking in his words, Sylvia looks at him with a new understanding. After a moment, she asks a pointed question. Where did he learn to fight? She waited for an answer, and he provided one. He had only taken courses at the Adventurers Guild, he explained. The rest of his knowledge came from simply living in the demon land. She remained unconvinced, stammering that he fights too well for that to be the only reason. He elaborated, stating that he observes a great deal. Once a person gets used to observing a target, he continued, they can predict its movements. He held up a bone to illustrate his point, explaining that one can learn a lot from dismantling creatures. Bones, for example, can bend inward but not outward. Understanding this allows one to escape an attack's range, which is a tactic in itself. She processed his words, murmuring, observing to herself. He concluded the lesson by adding that observing while developing one's own methods is a good approach. His instruction then shifted to foraging. Holding up an unfamiliar, scaly fruit, he explained that when finding such an item in the demon land, the first test for poison is to apply it to the skin. Before he could finish his warning, Jennifer violently spat out a mouthful of something, startling him. He turned to see her on the ground, pleading not to eat the fruit right away. Sylvia, having internalized the lesson, closed her eyes and acknowledged to herself that observation is indeed important. And so, their lives in the demon land continued, a constant series of lessons in survival amidst the harsh wilderness. One day, during lunch, the relative quiet was shattered by a sudden, piercing scream. Makio, crouching nearby, was instantly on alert. Helgon, pausing with a fruit halfway to her lips, identified the sound as a scream from the West River. Makio immediately took charge, telling Cher to come with him and ordering everyone else to stay inside the cave. He and Cher arrive at the source of the scream to find a grim scene. A person in dark robes lies dead on the stone path, a tattoo of a crescent moon and cross visible on their arm. As he takes in the sight, Cher kneels by one of the bodies, confirming his fears. She reports that they aren't breathing. They are all dead. Cher examines one of the bodies more closely, noting their blank, white eyes. She wonders aloud if they all drowned or were perhaps attacked by slimes. Her attention then shifts to the mark on their arms. She calls out to Makio, pointing out that all of the deceased bear the same distinctive tattoo. He acknowledges that they can't question the dead, prompting Cher to voice her concern. Is the demon land being invaded? Makio suggests they try to find someone still alive. Their search for survivors proves fruitless. After a short while, they find another body, just as lifeless as the others. With no one left alive, Cher suggests they should report this to the captain. Makio considers this, but warns that if they leave the bodies, they might reanimate as zombies, causing more trouble. Cher agrees it's a good point. He decides that before they do anything else, they should check if Jennifer and the others know anything about these people. With a plan set, they head back through the woods. Returning to the others, they present their findings. Sylvia's eyes widen in sudden recognition, her voice filled with shock as she exclaims, "This tattoo is..." She explains that it belongs to an assassination group from the church. When Makio asks for clarification, she identifies them as the 16 of Hazes, leaving the group stunned. The name Sylvia uttered sent a ripple of confusion through the group. Makio, unfamiliar with the term, asked what it was, while Jennifer Volkov expressed her disbelief that such a group even existed. Sylvia explained, her expression grim. She recalled that long ago, when her father was threatened by the church, she first heard the name 16 of Hazes. It came with a dire warning. If anyone with a crescent moon and cross tattoo appeared, one must abandon their home and flee immediately. Her words sank in, and Makio's mind raced with the troubling implications. He wondered if all 16 of them were already here, or how many more might be on their way. The situation had suddenly become far more complicated. His troubled thoughts were interrupted when Helgon voiced the most pressing question. Why would assassins be operating in the demon land? She scanned the group, asking if anyone had an idea. Her question prompted him to consider his own companions. He mentally cataloged them. Sylvia, a survivor of fallen nobility. Jennifer, an abandoned priest. Helgon, a fugitive elf. And Cher, a demon. He realized with a sinking feeling that there was no shortage of potential targets among them. He concluded that this matter was far too dangerous for them to handle alone. With resolve, he announced that they should leave it to the military. He then gave his orders, declaring that he would go to the captain's location himself, while everyone else was to stay behind for their own safety. Upon hearing Makio's report, the captain's face hardened with shock and disbelief. "The 16 of Hazes?" he exclaimed, the name clearly carrying significant weight. He confirmed that he had found the bodies already dead, noting the situation was tricky. Pointing to one of the corpses, he drew attention to the crescent moon and cross tattoo, and observed that the body had been preserved in sap. Later, the captain explained his plan. He would take care of the bodies for now, but needed to contact the central authorities for accurate information. When Makio voiced concern that the assassin's comrades might seek revenge, the captain dismissed it, stating he wasn't interested in their identities, only in the official response. He listened intently as Makio voiced a concern. If such dangerous people were coming, did that mean a bad rumor was circulating about the demon land? The captain's expression grew serious. He acknowledged the topic and stated there was something important he needed to discuss, asking if Makio had a moment. He was taken aback by the sudden gravity in the captain's voice, immediately asking what had happened. The captain clarified that the matter concerned the ownership of the demon land he had mentioned before. He then delivered the news. The official certificate was expected to arrive within 3 days. Once it did, the demon land would formally become part of Makio's territory. His face lit up with joy and relief. He bowed his head slightly, expressing his profound gratitude for the news. In response, the captain offered a warm smile and his congratulations, informing him that with this new territory, he had now become a noble. The declaration struck him with complete surprise. He stammered, unable to process the information, questioning if he had heard correctly, that he, a farmer's son, was now a noble. Seeing his confusion, the captain decided to table the details for the moment. He explained that the title was a necessity, a given role considering the sheer size of the territory he was now responsible for. His expression then hardened, shifting from congratulations to a grim warning. He revealed that within the next 3 days, there was a high probability that the private soldiers and adventurers of East Kenya would invade the demon land. The sudden turn from good news to imminent threat left him reeling. A cold sweat broke out on his brow as he demanded to know the reason for such an attack. He listened in shock as the captain elaborated on the dire situation. Until the territory officially belonged to him, the military was powerless to act against any invasion. In other words, the captain concluded it was the perfect time for East Kenya to strike. Stunned by the sudden weight of this responsibility, he protested, but the captain was firm. For the next 3 days, until the official documents arrived, Makio would have to protect the demon land on his own. The captain framed it as a preliminary battle, a trial to prove his worthiness of nobility, stating plainly that they were counting on him. He stammered, asking how large the invading force would be. The captain considered the defenses of East Kenya and gave a grim estimate: 1 to 2,000 soldiers. The number was staggering, and Makio could only shout in disbelief that it was impossible. The captain's gaze grew intense as he explained the larger stakes. If East Kenya were to gain any more power, it could trigger a full-scale war with the Elven Kingdom. That outcome, he stressed, was precisely what they had to prevent. As the weight of the geopolitical situation settled, Makio's own resolve began to crystallize. He admitted that the title of nobility meant little to him. His motivation was simpler. He just didn't want to give up this place. His mind filled with an image of the vast, untamed territory he had claimed. That land he would protect. His face hardened with resolve, and he declared aloud for the captain to hear, "I'll do my best." With a determined expression, Makio concludes that they're being invaded by East Kenya and must take action. Cher explains the basic strategy to the others. They will use the terrain to set traps, acknowledging that a head-on fight with only 5 people against an army of 2,000 would be impossible. Her plan is met with contrasting reactions. Sylvia trembles, seeing this as an unparalleled opportunity for a revenge battle, while Cher, for her own reasons, is completely fired up and ready for the fight. The others are more skeptical. Helgon voices her annoyance, calling it a hassle and finding it bizarre that an army would travel to this cursed territory. Jennifer agrees, questioning the point of fighting there at all. Cutting through the debate, a voice of reason points out that complaining is useless since the enemy will come regardless. The immediate priority is to start setting up pit traps in the forest. Without further delay, they begin their work. The sound of shovels striking earth echoes as Makio and Cher start digging. Helgon watches them, remarking with disdain that their method of digging holes together feels primitive, like something from the Stone Age. Annoyed, Makio turns and asks if she has any better ideas, to which she only hums in thought. After a moment, she suggests using magic. Cher latches onto the idea, excitedly telling Makio to make the holes with magic, confident they'll manage that way. Makio, however, flatly refuses. His refusal confuses Cher, who asks why he won't use the magic that makes the ground shift so powerfully. With a sigh, Makio relents, saying that if she insists, he will do it. He places his hand on the ground, bracing himself. The earth erupts. Instead of a simple pit, a massive mound of soil and rocks surges upward, forming a small mountain. His companions can only stare, utterly shocked by the overwhelming and uncontrolled display of power. His companions stared in stunned silence at the result of his power. Helgen's eyes were wide with disbelief, a bead of sweat tracing down her temple. Jennifer confessed she had never witnessed such magic, while Sylvia, equally bewildered, could only guess it was some form of earth magic, questioning its true nature. Makio, however, seemed unfazed by their shock. He explained that he doesn't consider it magic in the conventional way. Instead, he simply senses a rising force from the earth and uses his own magic to interfere with it, a process he claims isn't particularly difficult. Cher processed his words, her eyes closed in thought. She reasoned that his ability to find and manipulate this energy inherently meant he could create magic, yet the concept still eluded her understanding. He turned back to the group, genuinely perplexed by their reactions, asking what was so unusual about his ability. In unison, they all cried out in astonishment at his nonchalance. The realization dawned on Cher. Makio was creating magic based purely on his own imagination, completely disregarding established structures. Helgon, equally stunned, murmured that she was witnessing the very act of magic being created from nothing. Makio, still lost, countered that he thought magic was something one was meant to test and practice. Jennifer explained that the standard process involves learning to chant spells, simply to determine if one possesses any magical aptitude at all. He admitted that he couldn't do that, recalling how the elders in his own village had declared he had no talent for magic whatsoever. Her eyes widened as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This meant Makio could produce powerful magic without any chanting or formal procedure. With this understanding, the entire group turned, pointed accusingly at a startled Makio, and shouted in unison. He was a weirdo. Helgon, setting aside the revelation, told him to simply accept the label. She refocused the conversation, stating that what mattered now was how they could use this strange ability to their advantage. Makio suggested creating a maze, but then immediately reconsidered, realizing it would be meaningless if their enemies could simply go around. She shook her head, dismissing the idea of a complex structure. She explained that it didn't need to be so elaborate. For example, even a simple hill could create a significant tactical difference, especially if there were many of them. She laid out her plan, illustrating how they could force the enemy to cross several of the hills Makio creates, funneling them into valleys where traps could be set along the route to the cave. He listened intently, understanding the logic. She added that simply holding the high ground would already grant them a significant advantage in any battle. He then asked if there were any other strategies that might work, expressing his preference to avoid direct combat if at all possible. Cher immediately proposed using monsters. She suggested they could lure wild creatures with blood and fresh meat, turning them against the approaching enemy. Jennifer added that magic circles were also a good idea. Makio agreed, stating that could be done immediately since he had already practiced many of his circles from PJ's notebook before asking for any other suggestions. He then had a realization. It would be far more effective to create explosive magic circles directly upon the very hills his magic raised from the earth. Jennifer then considered another angle. If the enemy was camping as a large group, they could disrupt their supply lines. She asked Makio directly if they should poison their food. He confirmed that there were swamp flowers used for potions already buried in the ground nearby, which should be ripe for use by now. As he spoke, Helgon quietly contemplated the idea of using poison. She then proposed a practical method. They could make simple pots from palm sap. These pots, she explained, melt quickly in fire and are easily disposable, making them perfect for the task. Makio agreed enthusiastically, deciding that would be sufficient for now. His eyes narrowed with focus. With a solid plan in place, he was starting to feel they might actually have a chance to win. He resolved that they would do everything they possibly could. He gives the order from the forest floor, his voice echoing through the trees. Everyone is to prepare to start. With that, the faces of Jennifer, Helgon, Cher, and Makio hardened with resolve. The greatest operation in the Demon Land is about to begin. From within the forest, a voice confirms that all preparations are finally complete. He then suggests they eat something first while they wait. As the group gathers, Helgon's pointed ear suddenly twitches. A low, rhythmic thumping begins to reverberate through the ground. The sound is identified as the beat of distant drums, growing steadily louder. As the rhythmic thumping continues, Sylvia nervously asks if the enemy has arrived. She reasons that even if the troops are scattered, the drums must be motivating them for battle, a concept she admits she doesn't fully grasp. Jennifer wonders aloud if 2,000 people can truly fill the plain, even if they pass through the forest. In response, Makio issues a clear command. They are to evacuate to the top of the hill, and under no circumstances are they to step on the magic circles. Following his command, the group assembles on the crest of a hill, their eyes scanning the horizon. An hour passes. They remain in position, waiting. They continue their vigil as, in the distance, the enemy finally begins its approach. He grows increasingly agitated, exclaiming that the enemy still hasn't arrived. Beside him, Helgon observes that faint screams and the sounds of battle can be heard from the forest across the stream, speculating that the army might be fighting monsters. Considering her words, he stammers that it must be difficult for such a large force to move through the dense woods. Sylvia adds a grim possibility. They might even perish before reaching the Demon Land. He gazes out at the distant forest, concluding that the enemy seems to be struggling. With the immediate threat delayed, he decides to bake some bread in the cave while they wait. Cher immediately volunteers to join him. Eventually, the day passes without any sign of the army. As night falls and a full moon rises over their defensive earthworks, the group decides to return to the safety of the cave. Inside, he wonders aloud if the situation is similar to when East Kenya was invaded. Sylvia corrects this assumption, explaining that the castle didn't fall to a direct assault, but because multiple traders within had been bribed with money. The mention of traders gives Helgon pause. Her expression turns serious as she considers the unsettling possibility that there might be a few among their own group as well. She quickly dismisses the notion, however, shaking her head and declaring that it can't be. The others, seated around her, look on as the protagonist watches her sudden change in demeanor with a questioning look. He then recalls a piece of information he had forgotten to share. He announces to the group that once the battle is over, he might become a noble. His companions react with wide-eyed shock. This revelation makes him wonder about Helgon's past, questioning if she was a noble. Helgon, however, advises him against pursuing the title, stating that it's better not to associate with unreliable people. Cher looks on, disappointed by the advice. Wanting to be sure, he asks for their opinions. In response, Cher, Sylvia, and Jennifer all raise their hands in a clear show of support, while Helgon remains with her arms crossed, firmly against the idea. He processes the revelation with a bead of sweat on his temple, asking if anyone among them has actually been a noble before. He looks towards Cher, questioning her status specifically. Turning his attention to Jennifer, he then asks what it truly means to be a noble. The question makes her visibly distressed. She breaks into a sweat, her expression pained as she stares down at her food, unable to speak. Before she can answer, the others offer their own definitions. Cher stammers that it involves risking one's life for the country. Jennifer, recovering slightly, adds that it means making lots of babies. Helgon, ever pragmatic, states plainly that it is about managing one's own territory. The explanations continue in rapid succession. Cher mentions the necessity of daily training and studying war tactics. Jennifer pointedly adds the need to work hard at night. Helgon concludes with the more concrete duties of developing infrastructure and establishing trade with other territories. Taking in their varied and intense perspectives, he looks out over the quiet, starlit fields and decides he needs to research the matter for himself. The night passes without an enemy invasion. The group rotates guard duty, allowing the others to sleep. By the next morning, all is still calm. Suddenly, a massive explosion echoes from the nearby hill. Sylvia asks if it was one of the magic circles they had set, just as the shockwave hits, knocking Makio off balance. Reacting instantly, he and Sylvia race up the hill toward the rising plume of black smoke to investigate the disturbance. At the source of the explosion, they find the smoldering carcass of a large wild boar, caught and killed by their magical trap. He assesses the situation, realizing they cannot simply leave the corpse, as it would attract other monsters and potentially lead to the destruction of their remaining traps. He decides they must scatter the remains elsewhere. He is suddenly joined by Cher, whose presence surprises him. He turns to her, asking when she arrived. She ignores his question, instead pointing toward the horizon. She directs his attention across a stream, to the borders of the demon land, startling him. In that very direction, a company of heavily armored soldiers marches through the dense forest, their heavy footfalls echoing through the trees. Watching their advance from the shadows is a mysterious figure, her face concealed behind a four-eyed mask. The soldiers' objective becomes clear as the sharp crack of an axe biting into it rings out. They work in unison, swinging their axes with practiced efficiency and felling tree after tree. From their vantage point, the protagonist and Sylvia watch the activity. He wonders aloud what the soldiers are doing, and a nervous Sylvia realizes they are planning to build a bridge to cross over. As he considers this, Cher approaches, asking for his plan. She is followed by Helgon and Jennifer, the latter carrying a basket of provisions. Jennifer announces she has brought smoked meat and nuts for everyone, but Makio holds up a hand, telling them all to wait. His instruction is met with confusion. Jennifer questions the idea of a barbecue at such a tense moment. Cher explains the strategy. They should prepare food, as the smell will attract monsters. If a dangerous situation arises, she reasons, they can use the lured creatures against their opponents. Jennifer is taken aback by the suggestion. Meanwhile, across the stream, the soldiers' efforts have yielded a supply of felled logs, the raw materials for their bridge now ready for assembly. Across the border, a turbaned commander addresses his armored soldiers, giving the order to charge into battle. He instructs them that once they are inside the forest, they will split up and advance in separate teams. With his command given, the soldiers surge forward across the bridge, a wave of steel and determination entering the hostile territory. They move with weapons raised, ready for whatever awaits them. Their advance is immediately halted as the very ground seems to come alive. Gelatinous slimes erupt from the earth, their amorphous bodies lashing out and engulfing the front line of the invading force. The soldiers react with surprise, bracing themselves against the sudden, bizarre assault. One warrior manages to deflect a slime with his spear, but the creatures press their attack relentlessly. Deeper within the woods, a soldier on patrol freezes, spotting a trio of large, long-nosed monkeys sitting quietly on a fallen log, seemingly undisturbed by the commotion. The apparent peace shatters in an instant. The monkeys leap into a savage frenzy, one of them bringing a heavy mace down upon a soldier's head with a sickening crunch, his comrade crying out in horror. The assault intensifies as small, winged imps descend from the canopy, swarming a fallen soldier. Amidst the chaos, an officer screams at his troops not to falter, urging them to keep pushing forward. Heeding his desperate command, the remaining soldiers press onward, their formation tight as they march through a narrow, rocky canyon, the sounds of slaughter echoing behind them. Suddenly, the ground gives way. A soldier cries out as he plummets into a hidden pitfall. At the bottom, a small, solitary slime begins to glow ominously, illuminating the trap. The forest defenses are relentless. A monstrous plant with a gaping maw lunges at the soldiers from one side, while a swarm of giant wasps descend upon them from the other, leaving the invaders caught in a deadly crossfire. As the soldiers were being overwhelmed by the forest creatures, their commander, the turbaned magician, grew impatient. He ordered a stop to the advance, declaring his intent to burn the opposition away with his own magic. From a nearby ridge, two figures watched the chaos. Makio identified the magician as the enemy commander, prompting Helgon to realize that if they could kill him, the entire invasion might be halted. Makio asked if they should attempt it, and Helgon simply agreed. With practiced ease, she knocked an arrow and drew her bow, her gaze fixed intently on her distant target. As she took aim, the turbaned leader below seemed to sense the imminent danger, a flicker of awareness crossing his features. With a sharp release, the arrow flew, a silent streak cutting through the air towards the heart of the invading army. It struck true, embedding itself in the commander's masked face. He recoiled from impact as a nearby soldier cried out in alarm that the magician had been hit. Back on the ridge, Helgon clicked her tongue in frustration. Makio had just praised her shot, but she knew the truth. She had missed her intended kill shot. The wounded leader groaned in pain, clutching his face while his soldiers scrambled, demanding to know where the enemy attack had come from. His composure shattered. The commander began to sweat, screaming at his soldiers and demanding they protect him with their very lives. In response to his frantic command, the armored soldiers immediately formed a tight shield wall, creating a protective barrier around their panicked leader. They continued their advance without rest, urged on by their commander who, despite the sweat on his brow, bellowed for them to press forward. He then announced his own plan, to retreat to the other side of the river. Nearby, a powerfully built warrior watched him with a cynical smile, remarking on what a fine commander he was. This warrior and his companions then made their way across a crude log bridge. The group's armored leader asked if it was their turn to act, and the female warrior beside him simply confirmed that it was. From a distance, Makio and Helgon watched the new arrivals. A sharp gasp escaped Makio's lips. His eyes widened in disbelief, sweat forming on his temple. He recognized them instantly. Those were his father's enemies. Helgon, beside him, confirmed his dreadful realization. There was no mistaking it. Standing together on the riverbank was the main force of the rebellion army, a formidable party of adventurers, led by the man in ornate armor. Chaos erupts on the battlefield as armored soldiers are thrown into disarray. One is violently struck down while his comrades cry out, their attention drawn to a giant moth descending upon their ranks. The overwhelming assault halts their advance. A soldier shouts to his commander that it's impossible to move forward, their path completely blocked by a relentless barrage of traps and monsters. The commander, a warrior with long, dark hair and a grim expression, listens to the report, his gaze hardening with cold resolve. Nearby, other soldiers find themselves splattered with a dark liquid. One asks what it is, another recoiling in shock. A female adventurer calmly informs them that it is the blood of monsters. His voice cuts through the chaos with chilling authority. The commander raises his sword and declares that he will not permit any retreat. He issues a dire warning. Any soldier attempting to cross the bridge back will be cut down by his own hand. As if to punctuate his threat, a massive, spiked mace trap swings down from above, smashing into the ground. The blood-soaked soldiers can only stare in bewildered terror. Observing the unfolding massacre from a distance is Makio. An armored leader approaches him, holding a chain, and states grimly that this is no joke, urging him to hurry up and leave. He continues to watch the battlefield, his expression intent. A realization dawns on him. The soldier's demeanor has suddenly and completely changed. The reason for their change becomes brutally clear as the slaughter intensifies. The soldiers are being systematically cut down by man-eating plants, a sword-wielding warrior, and a pack of vicious wolves, their screams echoing across the valley. The grim-faced commander watches the carnage without a flicker of emotion. From his vantage point, Makio analyzes the horrific scene, questioning the commander's strategy. He observes that the soldiers are being killed easily by beasts lured by blood, while also falling prey to man-eating plants. He wonders aloud, what is their true purpose? The commander, his expression cold, declared their purpose, to forge a safe route for infiltration. He stated with grim finality that if any traps lay in their path, they would be triggered. That, he asserted, is the true purpose of soldiers. Following his orders, the soldiers were commanded to charge for the top of the hill. A wave of despair washed over them as they cried out, realizing the futility of trying to fight the monsters that awaited. Their fears were instantly validated as a massive explosion tore through their ranks, sending shrapnel and bodies across the barren landscape. The carnage continued as a massive bear descended upon the terrified survivors. From a safe distance, the commander and his companion watched the slaughter unfold, their faces impassive. Meanwhile, from another vantage point, Makio and his party watched the distant explosions rock the battlefield, the sound thundering across the hills. Another series of violent blasts erupted among the soldiers. Beside Makio, the horned woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. He looked on, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. Damn, he muttered, disgusted by the chaotic mess. Beside him, the cleric wondered aloud if the soldiers even had the right to survive in their commander's eyes. The elf responded with grim certainty, stating that they were simply being used as pawns. He turned to his companions, his expression hardening. He announced a change of plans, warning that the enemy's overwhelming numbers meant they would eventually reach their position. He urged his party to prepare themselves. As he finished speaking, a woman with short, dark hair appeared, calling his name with a look of startled recognition. Her eyes wide with determination, the warrior declared that the men who killed her father were among the enemy, and she wanted to finish them off herself. In response, Makio tempered her desire for revenge. He acknowledged her feelings but stated firmly that it was impossible and she would be better off not trying. He elaborated, explaining that he doubted she could win against the enemy commander alone. He had never seen anyone with such a powerful aura. With their original plan now completely awry, he announced a new course of action, urging everyone to move to a new location immediately. Following his lead, the group stood atop a hill, observing the landscape below as they prepared for their next move. He turned his attention to Sylvia, noticing her dissatisfaction. He warned her that failing to follow the new plan would cause trouble for everyone. Her expression suddenly shifted from discontent to inspiration. A new idea had struck her. Moments later, Cher and the other warrior were in motion, hurriedly pushing a cart laden with large cuts of meat. They brought the cart to Makio, announcing they had their entire supply of meat. He acknowledged them and gave the order to move it all to the south side of the hill, placing his hand on the ground to begin his work. The plan became clear. First, he would use his power to raise the terrain, creating a C-shaped, dead-end passage on the south side. Then, they would scatter the meat inside to lure the hungry monsters. The scent of the bait was already working, drawing the attention of various beasts from the surrounding forest, including a hulking giant and other reptilian creatures. The hulking giant, along with a host of other beasts, was drawn by the irresistible scent. Green tigers, lamias, giant spiders, and golden bats all converged on the location, their primal instincts overriding all else. Watching from a safe distance, Makio confirmed the success of his lure. He noted with a bead of sweat that the green tigers, lamias, golden bats, and even the forest giants had all arrived, drawn by the smell. He knew it was all about timing now. He turned his attention to a distant hilltop, calling out to his ally, Heli, to ask for a status report on the enemy soldiers. From her vantage point, Heli observed the situation, reporting back that the current state of affairs would not last much longer. Her words sharpened his focus, his expression hardening with resolve. He considered their dwindling resources. Just as Heli had said, they were running out of the traps they had prepared beforehand. The pitfalls were already filling up with soldiers, and there were no explosives left on the hill to create further diversions. At that moment, his thoughts turned to the final destination, a field of swimming flowers. He reasoned that any surviving soldiers would likely be asleep by now, but a sliver of doubt remained. Meanwhile, the rest of the party prepared to move. The axe warrior, flanked by the armored leader and the female adventurer with her bow drawn, gave the command to advance. He looked ahead with grim determination, acknowledging that the sacrifice of the soldiers had created a safe path for them. The axe warrior led the party forward, sword drawn, cautioning everyone to keep their guard up. They were to watch for any monsters or hostile plants. As they moved, the female adventurer grew anxious, questioning why it wasn't time yet, as Makio's signal hadn't come. Her attention then shifted to Cher, who was harnessing an incredible amount of magic power, leaving her in awe. The entire party remained concealed within the forest's edge, their expressions tense with anticipation as they waited for the opportune moment. From his hiding spot, Makio surveyed the open field ahead. Seeing his targets in the distance, he determined that the time to act had arrived. He moved with purpose, his first objective clear in his mind. He would cut off their escape route. With a surge of power, a colossal wall of earth erupted from the plains, sealing the path. The newly formed barrier stretched in a wide arc, completely enclosing the forest clearing and trapping whatever lay within. The effort left him breathing heavily, sweat beading on his brow. He acknowledged the significant drain on his magic power, but was satisfied that the task was finally complete. Back with the main group, the female adventurer spotted a signal in the distance. She urgently told Cher that it was here, prompting her to give their own signal in return. The axe warrior turned, alerted by her sudden cry. Her eyes widened with intense focus, the immense power she had gathered now ready to be unleashed. She unleashes her power with a piercing cry. A torrent of magical energy erupts from her, swirling violently as she completes the incantation. The spell illuminates the figures trapped within the earthen prison. It is a formidable and varied assembly. A lamia looks back in alarm, flanked by a green tiger, a giant spider, a hulking giant, a golden bat, an armored leader, and the elf, Helgon. All are caught completely by surprise. Within a swirling vortex of power, a hulking giant stands among an assembly of formidable beasts, a horned woman, a green tiger, a lamia, a giant spider, and a golden bat. Far below, confined within a narrow pass, a massive horde of other creatures roars, trapped and agitated. Meanwhile, far from the chaos, Makio sprints through a dense forest. He acknowledges to himself that the plan is in motion and things are about to become very busy. He reaches a high cliff, looking down upon the valley where the beasts are being corralled. With a sense of grim satisfaction, he confirms that they are gathering just as he intended. A bead of sweat forms on his brow as he focuses his energy, manipulating unseen forces with a precise gesture of his hands. The adventurer's plan had been to use magic to reopen sections of the passage, controlling the flow of the magical beasts they had trapped inside. But as the axe warrior stands ready with his companions, his expression suddenly shifts to one of alarm. Sensing an unexpected development, his alarm is justified as an entirely new horde of powerful creatures emerges before them, led by a colossal haze turtle and a ferocious wild bear. The adventurers are frozen in shock. The female warrior cries out, questioning what is happening, while the armored leader and the axe warrior can only stare in disbelief. The onslaught continues as another hulking giant, flanked by a pack of snarling wolves and other monsters, confronts the vastly outnumbered party. From his distant perch, Makio understands the unfolding scene perfectly. He realizes the true nature of the trap. The strongest trap in the demon land isn't a place, but the magical beasts themselves. As his trap springs, the adventurers find themselves overwhelmed. The axe-wielding warrior, seeing the sheer number of beasts, shouts for his comrades to stop fighting and retreat to the river. The retreat is cut short. A massive, toothy creature lunges forward, devouring one of their party whole. The armored leader turns to see their escape route blocked by a sheer wall of rock that wasn't there before. The archer cries out, urging him to escape, even if he must go alone. Amidst the chaos, a small winged beast stings the archer's hand. Ignoring the pain, she looses an arrow, striking down a charging boar as the corpse of another monster lies at her feet. From his distant vantage point, he watches the slaughter unfold, a grim certainty on his face. He knows it's useless for them. Their only paths are to fight the endless hordes of monsters, or there is no other path. The axe warrior spots the single, deliberate flaw in the trap. A small hole in the rock face, just large enough for one person. He realizes they have no choice but to try and escape through there. Following the warrior's guidance, the armored leader makes his way to the narrow opening, sword held at the ready. As he approaches the hole, a sudden presence makes him halt, his eyes widening in alarm. He finds a man waiting for him. It is Makio, who sighs and remarks on the leader's tenacity for staying alive. He then calmly asks, "Who are you?" The leader's eyes narrow in understanding. He asks if the man before him is the master of the demon land. Makio confirms that this is illegal trespassing and commands him to leave immediately. His abrupt command startles the leader. Makio smirks, noting the man's hot-blooded nature, and clarifies his position with chilling simplicity. In that case, if he just kills him, it will all be over. He narrowly dodges a swift sword strike, urging his opponent to listen to what others have to say for once. Ignoring the plea, the powerful warrior brings his massive sword down with crushing force, shattering the ground where Makio had been standing. He marvels at the unbelievable power behind the attack. As the warrior swings again with a furious expression, Makio realizes he has instinctively solidified his own arm with earth magic to block the blow, feeling the incredible force of the impact. The warrior, undeterred, announces his next move. He will use wind magic to slightly deflect the tip of his opponent's blade. The subtle gust of wind is enough to push Makio's sword aside, forcing him to leap high into the air to evade the warrior's follow-up strike. He lands nimbly in a crouch, putting distance between them. He catches his breath, acknowledging his opponent's strength, but questioning how long his magic can possibly hold out. The warrior, in turn, observes Makio's strange and unpredictable techniques. He narrows his eyes, a more concerning thought crossing his mind. He realizes that Makio hasn't shown any signs of attacking. He has only been defending the entire time. His gaze shifts past his opponent to the ground beyond, and his eyes widen as he begins to question why Makio has positioned himself in that specific spot. A realization dawns. He looks down at the disturbed earth, then back up with a sudden, booming laugh as he finally understands. He declares that he sees the strategy now. During the battle, Makio has been deliberately leading him towards pitfalls. Looking closely, he can now see the hidden traps scattered everywhere across the battlefield as Makio leaps over another one. He stands his ground, a fresh cut on his cheek, and calmly asserts that if one knows the location of the traps, there is nothing to fear. His opponent, however, disregards this logic. With a furious roar to die, the large warrior lunges, swinging his sword in a deadly arc, only for the blade to strike empty earth just before reaching its target. Suddenly, a new combatant leaps into the fray. A young woman wielding a massive war hammer smashes it into the ground, shattering the hidden pitfalls around Makio and sending splinters of wood flying. She stares at him, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion, as he calmly clarifies that his strategy was not about falling into the pitfalls. The large warrior, his attack thwarted, slams his sword into the ground in frustration. A sudden realization dawns on him. The holes were not just traps, but places for people to hide within. Upon hearing this, the hammer-wielding woman's expression softens into a warm, impressed smile, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. Makio, letting out a breath of relief, declares that it's over. His opponent, battered and bleeding from the mouth, can only stare back in stunned, defeated silence. As sunlight streams through the forest canopy, a voice calls out from the trees, affirming his declaration. The voice belongs to a masked figure in a turban, who now sits calmly on the ground before Makio. The leader poses a question. Does he still wish to fight? Flanked by two armored soldiers, the masked leader considers the situation, murmuring thoughtfully. With the conflict resolved, the war between the Demon Land and East Kenya finally came to an end. In exchange for the return of their wounded and dead, the opposing forces promised never to interfere with the Demon Realm again, and in a panic, they fled. A few days after handling the aftermath of the battle, Makio and his companions headed to the military training facility to report on the events. As part of the proceedings, an official document arrived, formally stating that ownership of the Demon Land had been transferred to him. His new status required his presence elsewhere. The female archer, looking concerned, asked if he truly had to travel all the way to the capital just to become a noble. Makio confirmed that there was a ceremony he had to attend, and that the military would prepare a carriage for him. He downplayed the event, explaining that even with the ceremony, it would likely just be the king placing a sword on his shoulder to formally appoint him. He then addressed the group of 4 women, informing them that the round trip would take about 10 days. He entrusted the house to their care while he was gone. Makio departed for the capital early the next morning. As he left, various thoughts swirled among the four who remained behind. Time passed normally in his absence. Elsewhere, along a dusty road, an elderly merchant with a prominent mustache sat patiently at his small, makeshift food stall. The sun beat down as a traveler approached his stall. It was Makio, carrying a large pack on his back. He looked up at the old man and asked for some sausage and bread. As Makio ate, the merchant noted his large amount of luggage and asked where he was headed. With his mouth full, Makio replied simply, "To the demon land, east of here." He paused his journey at a roadside stall, where the vendor eyed him with suspicion. The man laughed, asking if he had a death wish, and mentioned a rumor about a noble born in the demon land. He then questioned if Makio was planning to serve this noble, to which Makio replied with absolute certainty that he would never do such a thing. After finishing his meal, he licked his finger clean and made a startling declaration. He was that very noble. The vendor, taken aback, insisted he shouldn't joke like that, arguing that it was improper for a noble to travel without a carriage or an escort. Makio simply explained that running was much faster, which is why he'd left them behind. In a flash, he was gone, sprinting away and leaving the stunned vendor in his dust. As he ran through the open country, he mused that the demon realm's reputation was still quite poor. To govern the territory effectively, he realized they would need to develop specialty products. His mind raced with the sheer number of tasks ahead. There were mysteries to solve. The truth behind PJ, the identity of the noble in the sky, and the ancient secrets of the Estonia kingdom. The list felt endless. Pushing onward through the dense foliage, he felt a sense of progress. His destination was finally coming into view. He took a moment to reflect on their journey, acknowledging that they had managed to survive somehow up until now. Gazing out at the vast, verdant landscape of his new domain, he felt a renewed sense of confidence. They would manage somehow from now on, too. He finally arrived at a clearing, where his companions were already gathered. Sylvia, Helgon, Cher, and the female warrior were waiting. He approached them and asked if there had been any trouble while he was away. They greeted him with warm smiles. The female warrior commented that it looked like he'd brought back plenty of souvenirs. Helgon added that they had been eagerly awaiting his return, while Cher and shy Sylvia both welcomed him back. He stood before them, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. His expression was one of genuine contentment as he looked upon his companions, finally reunited. Breaking the quiet moment, he announced his return with two simple words, "I'm home." Cher responded with an enthusiastic wave, her face alight with joy, as Helgon, Sylvia, and the female warrior all greeted him with warm, welcoming smiles.